Vivian Cross built an empire worth $3 billion, but she couldn't buy what mattered most: her son's ability to walk. For 18 months, the world's best doctors failed where a minimum wage janitor succeeded. The night she caught Daniel Mercer in her son's bedroom, performing what looked like physical therapy with the precision of a medical professional, everything she believed about success, class, and miracles shattered. This is the story of how a woman who had everything learned the most valuable lesson from a man who had nothing. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The executive elevator to Vivian Cross's penthouse released her into marble silence at 6:47 p.m., 3 hours earlier than her usual return. The acquisition of Brennan Media had closed faster than projected, leaving her afternoon unexpectedly clear. She'd texted her assistant to cancel the 8 p.m. call with Singapore, slipped her Louboutins into her handbag, and driven home in her stockinged feet, an unfamiliar lightness in her chest at the prospect of seeing Theo before his bedtime routine. The penthouse stretched before her in calculated perfection, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Manhattan's glittering sprawl, furniture arranged by designers who charged more per consultation than most families earned in a year. Everything gleamed. Everything was exactly where it should be. Everything was empty. Vivian set her bag on the entry console, noting the absence of Mrs. Chen, Theo's primary caregiver. Thursday was Mrs. Chen's evening for her grandson's music recital. Vivian had approved the schedule change 3 weeks ago, though she couldn't quite remember the details now. Her calendar managed such things. She moved through the living room, her feet silent on imported Italian tile, and that's when she heard it, laughter, not the polite, careful sounds that usually emanated from Theo's wing of the penthouse, but genuine, bubbling, unrestrained joy. The kind of laughter she'd heard in videos of her son from before the accident, before the 18 months of hospitals and experimental treatments and incremental disappointments. Vivian's breath caught. She moved toward the sound, her heart performing strange acrobatics in her chest. Theo's door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. Vivian approached slowly, something between hope and fear tightening in her throat. She'd learned not to hope too much, not after Dr. Weinstein's last assessment after the specialist from Johns Hopkins had used phrases like significant limitations and realistic expectations. She peered through the gap in the doorway and froze. The scene before her made no sense. Her 6-year-old son lay on the specialized therapy mat she'd had custom-made in Germany, $14,000 of orthopedic engineering. But it wasn't Dr. Patel's recommended exercises Theo was performing, and it wasn't Mrs. Chen guiding him. It was Daniel Mercer, the janitor. He knelt beside Theo, one hand supporting the boy's left leg at the knee, the other beneath his ankle. Daniel's movements were precise, controlled, rotating Theo's leg through a range of motion that looked both gentle and purposeful. He counted softly. 3, 4. Good. That's perfect. Buddy, 5. And Theo giggled as Daniel made exaggerated faces with each number. Does that hurt anywhere? Daniel asked, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed to fill the room. Nope, Theo chirped. It feels funny, like tingly. That's the blood flow increasing. Your muscles are waking up. Daniel shifted his grip, his fingers finding new positions along Theo's calf with obvious intention. We're reminding them what they're supposed to do. Vivian's mind reeled. Daniel Mercer was 42 years old according to his employment file. She'd reviewed it personally when the housekeeping agency had sent him 3 months ago. High school diploma. No college listed. Previous employment at commercial cleaning companies, a brief stint in building maintenance. References described him as reliable, quiet, and thorough. Nowhere in his file did it mention medical training, yet he moved like someone who'd spent years studying anatomy. His hands found pressure points and muscle groups with confidence. He used terminology, blood flow, muscle memory, range of motion, that she'd only heard from the parade of specialists she'd hired. Okay, other side, Daniel said, and Theo cooperatively shifted his position. Daniel? Theo's voice dropped to a stage whisper. Do you think I'll be able to run someday? The question stabbed Vivian in the chest. Theo had stopped asking her that question 4 months ago, after she'd tried to explain progressive improvement and manageable goals in terms a 6-year-old could understand. She'd watched hope fade from his eyes, replaced by a resignation that no child should carry. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He continued the rotation exercise, his expression thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and honest. "I think your body is stronger than anyone's given it credit for, Theo. I think you've got more fight in you than most adults I know. Will you run? I don't know. But I know that 3 weeks ago, you couldn't hold this position for more than 5 seconds, and now you're at 20. That's not nothing. That's your muscles learning, your body remembering." Remembering what? What it felt like before the accident. What strong feels like. Daniel completed the rotation and gently lowered Theo's leg. "Your brain's like a really smart computer, right? And sometimes the connection between your brain and your legs gets a little fuzzy, but the information's still there. We just have to help the signal get through stronger." It was the clearest explanation of neurological trauma and muscle atrophy Vivian had ever heard, and it was coming from a man who mopped her floors for $18 an hour. Theo sat up, his face flushed with exertion and excitement. "Can we do the balance thing now?" "Let's see." Daniel pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. "You've been working for 22 minutes, Doctor. Patel's protocol says maximum 25 minutes for your age and condition, so we've got 3 minutes, but..." He held up a finger as Theo started to protest. "We've introduced 2 new movement patterns today, which means your nervous system is processing a lot of new information. If we push too hard, you'll be sore tomorrow, and then we can't work at all." "But I'm not tired." "I know you're not. That's actually a good sign. Means your stamina is improving." Daniel stood, offering his hands to Theo. "Tell you what, we'll do 3 minutes of standing balance work, but gentle. Just reminding your legs what it feels like to hold your weight. Deal?" "Deal!" Daniel carefully helped Theo into a standing position, supporting him under the arms. Theo's legs trembled. They always did, but he bore his own weight for several seconds before Daniel took more of the load. "There you go," Daniel murmured. "Feel that? You're holding it. Your quads are engaging. Your core is tight." "That's all you, buddy." Vivian's hands had found their way to her mouth. She watched her son stand with more confidence than she'd seen in 18 months. His face radiated concentration and pride. In the therapy sessions she'd attended, and admittedly there hadn't been many given her schedule, Theo had been passive. Technicians moved his limbs while he stared at the ceiling. Physical therapists consulted clipboards and murmured to each other in medical jargon that excluded him from his own treatment. He was a problem to be solved, a case to be documented. With Daniel, he was a person, a capable person, a person who could improve. "Time," Daniel announced gently. "That was beautiful, Theo, really strong." He helped Theo back down to the mat, then knelt beside him, producing a small notebook from his back pocket. Vivian watched as he jotted notes, his handwriting surprisingly neat. "What are you writing?" Theo asked, peering over Daniel's arm. "Just keeping track of your progress, see?" He tilted the notebook so Theo could see. "Week 1, you held standing position for 8 seconds. Week 2, 12 seconds. Today you hit 17 seconds. That's called trending upward." "What's trending mean?" "It means you're getting better, steadily, measurably better." Daniel closed the notebook and smiled. "Pretty cool, right?" Theo's grin could have powered the city. "Really cool." "Okay, let's get you transitioned for rest time. Your body does a lot of healing while you sleep, so we want to make sure you're positioned right." Vivian watched as Daniel carefully helped Theo into his specialized wheelchair, a device that had cost more than Daniel probably earned in 3 months. But Daniel's hands moved over it with familiarity, adjusting the leg supports, checking the safety restraints, positioning Theo's spine with attention to ergonomic detail. "Daniel?" Theo's voice had gone soft, almost shy. "Yeah, buddy? You're my favorite person who helps me." Something flickered across Daniel's face, emotion quickly controlled, but Vivian caught it. Pride mixed with sadness, mixed with determination. "You're pretty high on my list too," Daniel said quietly. He squeezed Theo's shoulder. "Now, Mrs. Chen should be back soon, And I need to finish the third-floor hallway before Mr. Davidson complains about streaks on the windows again. Theo giggled. Mr. Davidson complains about everything. He's got high standards, nothing wrong with that. Daniel stood, stretching his back. I'll see you Tuesday, okay? And remember what we talked about. Practice my ankle rotations, drink lots of water, and tell Mrs. Chen if anything hurts, Theo recited dutifully. Perfect. You got it. Vivian stepped back from the door as Daniel moved toward it, her heart hammering. She pressed herself against the hallway wall, hoping the shadows would conceal her, watching as Daniel emerged from Theo's room. He paused to pull the door nearly closed, leaving it open just enough for light and sound to travel, exactly as Mrs. Chen always positioned it. Then he walked past Vivian's hiding spot without seeing her, his footsteps quiet on the tile, a canvas supply bag slung over his shoulder. She caught a glimpse of his profile, a strong jawline shadowed with end-of-day stubble, eyes tired but kind, the face of a man who'd worked a full day and was nowhere near finished. She should confront him. Immediately. This was her son, her home, her extremely expensive medical care being… What? Usurped? Supplemented? Undermined? She should demand explanations. She should call the agency and report this massive overreach of duties. She should… But Theo had been laughing, really laughing, and standing, holding his own weight for 17 seconds, nearly twice what he'd achieved in his last professional therapy session. Vivian waited until she heard the service elevator engage, then moved to Theo's door. Mom? Theo's voice carried surprise and joy in equal measure. You're home early. She entered his room, arranging her face into what she hoped was a normal expression. The Singapore call got moved. I thought I'd come check on my favorite person. Theo beamed at her, and Vivian's heart ached at how rare these moments had become. When had she started measuring her son's childhood in quarterly reports and board meetings? Guess what? Theo said eagerly. I stood for 17 seconds today. That's my new record. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Vivian moved closer, perching on the edge of his bed. Her eyes took in the room with new attention. The therapy mat arranged just so. Resistance bands hung at precise heights on a custom frame that definitely hadn't been there last month. A chart on the wall tracking something called range of motion progress in handwriting she now recognized as Daniel's. Did Dr. Patel try a new technique, sup? She asked carefully. Dr. Patel comes on Mondays and Wednesdays, Theo said matter-of-factly. Daniel does the fun exercises. He knows different stuff. What kind of different stuff? Theo scrunched his face, thinking. Like, Dr. Patel does the stretches from the book, but Daniel does stretches that help the stretches work better. He says sometimes the medical way and the practical way need to talk to each other. Vivian absorbed this. And Daniel has been helping you for how long? Since Mrs. Chen's back got hurt trying to lift me. Theo said this without any particular emphasis, as though it were common knowledge. She was crying, Mom. Her back really hurt. Daniel heard her and came to help, and he showed her this better way to help me move from the chair to the bed. And then he asked if he could show me some exercises his wife used to do with kids like me. His wife? She died. She was a therapist for kids who have trouble walking. Daniel knows all the stuff she taught him. Theo's expression grew solemn. He misses her a lot. Sometimes I can tell he's sad when he talks about her. Vivian's mind raced. A dead wife who'd been a pediatric physical therapist, training that came from lived experience rather than formal education, the kind of knowledge that came from desperate necessity, learning everything possible to help a loved one. Does Mrs. Chen know Daniel's been helping you? Uh-huh. She thinks he's really good. She says his hands have healing in them. Theo yawned suddenly, the exertion of his session catching up with him. Mom, can we have breakfast together tomorrow before you go to work? The request was so simple, so achingly normal, that Vivian felt tears threaten. Of course we can. Anything you want. Waffles? Waffles it is. She stayed with him until his breathing evened into sleep, watching the rise and fall of his small chest, the peaceful expression on his face. Her brilliant boy. Her brave boy. Her boy who'd been dealt such a cruel hand by fate. A drunk driver running a red light, 5 seconds of impact that had changed everything. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic at first. Significant trauma to the lumbar spine, but no complete severance. With therapy, time, and youth on his side, Theo should regain most function. But should had become might, had become unlikely, as the months dragged on and Theo's progress plateaued. Vivian had thrown money at the problem. The best specialists, experimental treatments, a home therapy setup that rivaled professional rehabilitation centers. She'd restructured her entire top floor to be ADA compliant, hired round-the-clock care, flew in experts from 3 continents, and a janitor with no formal credentials was getting better results. She left Theo's room and went directly to her home office, a space dominated by minimalist design and ruthless efficiency. Her computer woke at her touch, facial recognition granting instant access. She pulled up the building's security footage, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The system was sophisticated. She'd insisted on it. Cameras covered every hallway, every entrance, every common area. She found the footage from Theo's room, technically illegal to record in private spaces, but she justified it as medical monitoring and began scrolling backward. 3 days ago, Daniel entering Theo's room with Mrs. Chen's blessing, carrying what looked like homemade equipment, wooden boards, resistance bands, foam padding. The session that followed showed the same careful attention she'd witnessed tonight, 1 week ago. Daniel arriving early before his shift started to adjust the frame he'd built for Theo's resistance bands. He'd measured angles with a protractor, checking and rechecking before securing anything. 2 weeks ago. A session where Theo had grown frustrated, nearly crying, saying his legs wouldn't work and would never work. Daniel sitting on the floor beside him, not offering empty platitudes, just presence. Then quietly, "My daughter can't talk much. Her brain works different than most kids. And you know what I learned? Different doesn't mean broken. It means we haven't found the right way yet." Vivian watched her son's face transform, frustration giving way to tentative hope. She scrolled further back. 3 months of footage. Daniel always arriving with permission, always professional, always documenting his work. Mrs. Chen hovering at first, then gradually trusting, then actively supporting. Theo's progression visible even in the grainy security footage. More movement, more confidence, more joy. And through it all, Daniel Mercer, a man whose employee file listed his job as sanitation and maintenance, performing what looked remarkably like expert-level pediatric physical therapy. Vivian sat back in her chair, her empire of glass and steel glittering beyond her windows. She'd built Cross Industries from the ground up, surviving boardroom battles and hostile takeovers, earning her reputation as one of the most formidable businesswomen in New York. She'd developed an instinct for people, who to trust, who to fire, who to watch. But she'd completely missed the person helping her son. The question was, what did she do now? Her instinct, the one that had served her so well in business, screamed to investigate, to verify, to control the situation. Daniel Mercer was an unknown variable in her son's care, and unknown variables were dangerous. He could be a liability. He could be unqualified. He could be, despite all appearances, causing harm she wasn't educated enough to recognize. But Theo had laughed tonight, really laughed, and stood for 17 seconds, which was, she opened another browser window, pulling up the detailed logs Dr. Patel's office provided, exactly 8 seconds longer than his previous record, set 2 months ago. Vivian pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Dr. Elizabeth Patel's personal cell. The neurologist answered on the second ring. "Vivian, is everything all right with Theo?" "Yes." "No, I'm not sure." Vivian paced her office, organizing her thoughts. "I need you to tell me something honestly. Theo's progress, has there been any change in the last few months?" A pause. Papers rustling. "Actually, yes. I was planning to discuss it at our next quarterly review. Theo's shown marked improvement in several key areas. His muscle tone has increased, his range of motion is expanding, and most surprisingly, his proprioception, his body's awareness of itself in space, has improved significantly." What would cause that kind of improvement? Consistent, targeted therapy combined with age-appropriate developmental growth. The human body, especially a young one, can surprise us. Dr. Patel's voice warmed with professional excitement. "Theo's case has always been promising, Vivian. The trauma was significant, but not insurmountable. With proper care—" "What kind of proper care? Be specific." Another pause, this one more puzzled. Range of motion exercises targeting the affected muscle groups. Proprioceptive training. Gentle strength building. The protocol I outlined months ago, which I understood was being followed diligently by Mrs. Chen and your home therapy team. And if someone without formal training but with extensive practical experience was supplementing that protocol with additional techniques, would that be dangerous? That would depend entirely on the techniques and the person's actual knowledge base. Dr. Patel's voice had gone cautious. Vivian, what's going on? I'm not sure yet, but I need you to come tomorrow, early. I want you to observe Theo's full range of abilities and tell me if there's any indication of improper treatment or potential harm. Of course, I can be there by 8. Thank you, Elizabeth. Vivian ended the call and returned to the security footage, watching Daniel Mercer guide her son through exercises with the patience of a saint and the precision of a trained professional. Who was this man, and why was someone with his obvious skill set cleaning buildings for minimum wage? She opened a new browser window and began to search. Daniel Mercer wasn't a particularly unique name, but combined with New York City and cross-referenced with the employment application she pulled from her files, she started to build a picture. Obituaries first. Sarah Mercer, age 37, survived by husband Daniel and daughter Lila. Pediatric physical therapist specializing in neurological development disorders. In lieu of flowers, donations to the Children's Mobility Foundation. The obituary was 3 years old. Vivian kept searching. A few social media accounts, barely maintained. Photographs of Daniel with a bright-eyed woman and a serious-looking little girl. The last posts were condolence messages, friends expressing sympathy, other therapists praising Sarah's work. Then, nothing. Digital silence, as though Daniel had withdrawn from the online world entirely. She found one more thing, a LinkedIn profile, last updated 4 years ago. Daniel Mercer, Bachelor of Science in Exercise Physiology from Hunter College. Certifications in Pediatric Care Assistance and Special Needs Support. Employment history working alongside his wife at a private therapy practice specializing in developmental disorders. And then a gap. 3 years of nothing professionally documented. Just the employment history Vivian had in her files. Janitorial work, building maintenance, jobs that required no interview panel or credential verification. A man had lost his wife and walked away from a profession he'd built with her. Then somehow ended up cleaning buildings, including the one where a little boy desperately needed the exact skills he'd spent years developing. Coincidence? Fate? Vivian didn't believe in fate. She believed in patterns, in cause and effect, in the strategic application of resources to achieve desired outcomes. But she'd also just watched her son stand and laugh and hope, all because a janitor with a dead wife's training had decided to help. Her phone buzzed. A text from her COO about the Tokyo merger, another from her assistant about tomorrow's schedule, a reminder that she had a 6 a.m. call with London. The empire never slept. It demanded constant feeding, constant attention, constant sacrifice. And she'd sacrificed so much, including, she was beginning to realize, time with her son that she'd never get back. Vivian looked at the security footage one more time, watched Daniel support Theo's weight, watched her son's face glow with accomplishment, watched a moment of pure connection between a man who'd lost everything and a boy trying to find his way back. Then she closed the laptop and went to pour herself 2 fingers of scotch from the crystal decanter on her desk. Tomorrow, Dr. Patel would assess Theo. Tomorrow, Vivian would get answers about whether Daniel Mercer was a miracle worker or a liability she'd been too blind to recognize. But tonight, she sat in her perfect office, in her perfect penthouse, and admitted something she'd never said out loud. She had no idea how to help her own son. She'd been throwing money at specialists and state-of-the-art equipment, believing that wealth could solve any problem. Instead, the solution had been cleaning her floors for 3 months, asking nothing, expecting nothing, helping simply because he could. Vivian sipped her scotch and stared out at the Manhattan skyline, at the empire she'd built that suddenly felt hollow. Somewhere in this vast, complicated city, Daniel Mercer was probably tucking his own daughter into bed, reading her a story, being present in all the ways Vivian had forgotten how to be. And tomorrow she would have to decide whether to let him keep helping Theo or whether to protect her son from the unknown variable by sending Daniel Mercer back to cleaning floors. The scotch burned going down, but not as much as the realization that she'd been so busy building an empire that she'd missed the small miracles happening in her own home. Dr. Elizabeth Patel arrived at 7:53 a.m., 7 minutes early, carrying her medical bag and the kind of focused expression that made her one of Manhattan's most sought-after pediatric neurologists. Vivian met her at the private elevator, already dressed in tailored wool pants and a silk blouse despite the early hour, her third cup of coffee doing little to mask the sleepless night behind her eyes. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Vivian said, leading Dr. Patel toward Theo's wing. "You sounded concerned last night. That's not like you." Dr. Patel's sharp gaze swept over Vivian's face. "When was the last time you slept?" "I've been reviewing security footage and medical records. I need your professional opinion on something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, regardless of how it might sound." They paused outside Theo's room, where morning light streamed through the windows, and the sound of Mrs. Chen's gentle humming drifted into the hallway. "Doctor." Patel set down her bag, giving Vivian her full attention. "Of course. What's going on?" Vivian chose her words carefully. If someone with extensive practical knowledge but potentially limited formal credentials was providing supplementary therapy to Theo, therapy that appears to be yielding positive results, would I be negligent as a parent to allow it to continue? Dr. Patel's eyebrows rose. "That's a complex question with a lot of variables. Who are we talking about?" Before Vivian could answer, Theo's delighted voice carried from inside the room. "Daniel, you're here early!" Both women turned toward the sound. Through the partially open door, they saw Daniel Mercer entering from the service hallway, dressed in his maintenance uniform, that same canvas bag over his shoulder. He was smiling at Theo with unmistakable warmth. "Couldn't sleep," Daniel said easily, moving to kneel beside Theo's bed where the boy was already sitting up, eager. "Thought I'd check in before my shift starts. How are you feeling this morning? Any soreness from yesterday?" "A little in my knees, but Mrs. Chen did the ice like you said." "Good man, that's exactly right." Daniel glanced at Mrs. Chen, who nodded confirmation. "That soreness means your muscles are rebuilding. It's supposed to happen." Dr. Patel's expression had shifted from curiosity to intense professional interest. She watched Daniel's hands as he gently manipulated Theo's leg, assessing flexibility and muscle response with practiced efficiency. "Vivian," Dr. Patel said quietly, "is that your janitor performing what appears to be a professional assessment of Theo's muscular condition?" "Yes." "And he's been doing this for how long?" 3 months, apparently." Dr. Patel pushed the door open wider, stepping into the room. Daniel looked up, surprise flickering across his face as he registered both Vivian and the doctor. He immediately released Theo's leg and stood, his posture shifting to something more guarded. "Ms. Cross, Dr. Patel, I was just—" He stopped, seeming to realize there was no innocent explanation that would satisfy what they'd just witnessed. "I should go." "No," Vivian said firmly. "Stay. Dr. Patel is here to observe Theo's current capabilities. I'd like you to demonstrate what you've been working on with him." The silence that followed felt heavy with implication. Mrs. Chen had gone very still in her chair by the window. Theo looked between the adults with growing confusion. "Am I in trouble?" Theo asked, his voice small. "No, sweetheart," Vivian said quickly, moving to his side. "No one's in trouble. Dr. Patel just wants to see how well you're doing." Daniel cleared his throat. "Ms. Cross, I never meant to overstep. I should have asked your permission directly instead of just—" "We'll discuss that later," Vivian interrupted. "Right now, I want Dr. Patel to see what you've been doing. Please." It wasn't quite an order, but it wasn't a request either. Daniel held Vivian's gaze for a long moment, and she saw something complicated move behind his eyes. Pride, fear, resignation, defiance, all mixed together in the expression of a man who knew he'd crossed professional boundaries, but didn't regret it. "All right," he said finally. He turned back to Theo, his demeanor shifting back to that gentle confidence Vivian had witnessed the night before. "Theo, buddy, we're going to do our morning assessment, okay? Just like always. Dr. Patel's going to watch to see how awesome you're doing." Theo's uncertainty melted into a grin. "Okay." For the next 40 minutes, Vivian and Dr. Patel watched Daniel guide Theo through a progression of exercises that demonstrated both thorough knowledge of pediatric physical therapy and remarkable intuition for Theo's specific needs. He started with simple range of motion work, narrating each movement for Dr. Patel's benefit, explaining the purpose and the adaptation he'd made from standard protocols. Traditional external rotation at this angle can create strain on the hip flexor for patients with Theo's specific nerve damage pattern, Daniel explained as he adjusted Theo's leg position. But if you shift the angle 15 degrees and provide counter support here, he placed his other hand against Theo's hip, you get the same range of motion benefit without the pain response. Theo, any discomfort? Nope. Feels good. Dr. Patel moved closer, her professional mask firmly in place, but Vivian could read the fascination in her colleague's body language. The doctor was watching a masterclass in adaptive therapy techniques, and she knew it. Where did you learn that modification? Dr. Patel asked. Daniel's hands never stopped their careful work. My wife developed it for a patient with a similar presentation. Incomplete spinal cord injury with asymmetric lower extremity involvement. The standard approach was causing secondary muscle guarding, so she experimented until she found angles that worked with the body's compensatory patterns instead of against them. Your wife was a physical therapist? Pediatric specialist. 20 years of clinical experience before she passed. The room absorbed this information in silence. Dr. Patel glanced at Vivian, one eyebrow raised in a gesture that clearly said, "Did you know about this?" Vivian gave a tiny shake of her head. Daniel continued the session, moving through progressively more complex exercises. Balance work, proprioceptive training using textured surfaces. Gentle resistance training with bands that he'd clearly calibrated to Theo's specific strength levels. And through it all, he maintained a running dialogue with Theo, encouraging, educating, celebrating small victories. Okay, big finish, Daniel announced. Standing sequence. Ready? Ready! Daniel positioned himself behind Theo, hands ready to support but not immediately bearing weight. Remember what we practiced. Core tight. Weight through your heels, eyes forward. Mrs. Chen, can you start the timer? Mrs. Chen pulled out her phone, finger poised. Ready. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Theo pushed himself up from the mat, his legs trembling with effort but holding. Daniel's hands hovered inches from Theo's torso, ready to catch him but letting him do the work. 15 seconds passed. Then 20. Theo's face was a mask of concentration, sweat beading on his forehead. 25, Mrs. Chen called out. New record. 30, Daniel counted softly. You're doing it, Theo. All you. At 33 seconds, Theo's legs began to buckle. Daniel caught him smoothly, taking his weight and lowering him back to the mat with perfect control. Theo was breathing hard but grinning with triumph. 33 seconds, he gasped. Did you see, Mom? Dr. Patel, did you see? I saw, Dr. Patel said, and her voice carried something Vivian rarely heard from the unflappable neurologist. Amazement. That was remarkable, Theo. Daniel pulled out his notebook, recording the time and adding observations in his neat handwriting. Dr. Patel moved closer, reading over his shoulder, and Vivian watched the doctor's expression shift from professional curiosity to outright astonishment. You've been documenting everything, Dr. Patel said. It wasn't a question. Daily logs, duration, technique, response, any pain or discomfort, environmental factors that might affect performance. Daniel flipped back through pages filled with meticulous notes, charts tracking progress over weeks. I learned from my wife, if you're not documenting, you're not really treating, you're just hoping. Dr. Patel took the notebook, studying the entries with the intensity of someone reading a groundbreaking research paper. Vivian moved to sit beside Theo on the mat, smoothing his sweat-dampened hair. I'm so proud of you, she told him quietly. I'm getting stronger, Mom. Daniel says maybe by summer I can try the walker outside. In the real park, not just on the therapy track. The therapy track. Another thing Vivian had paid a fortune for. A specialized indoor walking path with graduated resistant surfaces and safety railings. Theo had managed 12 feet on it during his last professional session 2 months ago. He'd hated every minute of it, crying with frustration at his body's refusal to cooperate. But the real park, the park where other children played, where normal life happened. Theo hadn't been there since before the accident. "We'll get you there," Vivian promised, and surprised herself by believing it. Dr. Patel closed the notebook and looked at Daniel with an expression Vivian couldn't quite read. "Mr. Mercer, can you step into the hallway with me? Miss Cross, you as well. Mrs. Chen, would you mind supervising Theo's cool-down routine?" "Of course, doctor." The three adults moved into the hallway. Dr. Patel closed Theo's door behind them and turned to Daniel with arms crossed. "I need to see your credentials," she said bluntly. "All of them." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I have copies on my phone. My wife insisted I keep digital records of everything after..." He stopped, pulled out his phone, and began navigating through files. Bachelor's degree in exercise physiology from Hunter College. Certification in pediatric care assistance. Additional training through my wife's practice in adaptive techniques for special needs populations. I'm not a licensed physical therapist. I never claimed to be. He handed the phone to Dr. Patel, who studied the documents with a lawyer's attention to detail. Vivian watched Daniel's face, saw the way his shoulders had drawn tight with defensive tension, the set of his jaw that suggested he was preparing for condemnation. "This training," Dr. Patel gestured at the screen, "this is legitimate, extensive, actually. Why aren't you working in a clinical setting?" Daniel's laugh was bitter. "You mean, why am I cleaning toilets instead of helping kids?" "I tried. After Sarah died, I applied to 63 therapy centers, hospitals, and private practices across 3 states. I'm a single father with an autistic daughter who needs specialized care. I have no independent clinical experience. Everything I learned was shadowing my wife or working under her license. And I'm male, which in pediatric care apparently makes me either a liability or a curiosity." He took his phone back, the movement sharp with suppressed anger. Turns out the healthcare system doesn't care much about passion or practical knowledge. They care about letters after your name and liability insurance and schedules that don't accommodate picking up your kid from special education at 2:45 p.m. every day. So yes, I clean buildings. The hours are flexible, the pay covers rent, and nobody asks questions about my credentials. "But you kept helping kids," Vivian said softly. "I volunteered where I could, community centers, support groups, places that couldn't afford to be picky about credentials." Daniel's expression softened slightly. "And then I met Mrs. Chen, who had a patient who needed help. So I helped." Dr. Patel was quiet for a long moment, studying Daniel with clinical assessment. "What you're doing with Theo, it's working. His improvement over the past 3 months is documented in my own records, though I attributed it to the formal protocol. But watching you just now, seeing your technique and your documentation..." She paused. "You're as good as half the licensed therapists I know, better than some." "Thank you," Daniel said carefully. "However," Dr. Patel's tone sharpened, "you're operating in a legal gray area. If Theo were injured during one of your sessions, Ms. Cross would be liable, Mrs. Chen would be liable, and you would be criminally liable for practicing without proper licensure. One parent's complaint, one bad outcome, and everything you've built with Theo disappears, along with your freedom, potentially." The words hung in the air like a sentencing. Vivian felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her, the empire builder's instinct to minimize risk warring against the mother's desperate hope that her son might actually recover. "What do you recommend?" Vivian asked Dr. Patel. The neurologist looked between them. "Officially, I should recommend that Mr. Mercer cease all therapeutic intervention immediately and that Theo continue with licensed professionals only." "And unofficially?" Dr. Patel smiled slightly. "Unofficially, I recommend we find a way to make this work legally. Because whatever Mr. Mercer is doing, it's giving Theo something that 6-figure medical bills haven't provided: hope and measurable improvement. We'd be fools to throw that away over paperwork." Daniel's expression showed cautious surprise. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that I bring you on as a consultant to Theo's care team. You work under my supervision, we document everything according to medical protocols, and I take ultimate responsibility for treatment decisions. It's not a perfect solution, but it keeps you legal and keeps Theo improving." "I can't afford to pay for additional consultants," Daniel said flatly. "I'm barely covering Lila's therapy bills as it is." You wouldn't be paying me, Dr. Patel said. Ms. Cross would be paying you. Vivian found both of them looking at her expectantly. The businesswoman in her saw the obvious solution. Hire Daniel properly, bring his knowledge into the legitimate care structure, eliminate the liability while maintaining the benefit. It was elegant, efficient, exactly how she'd built her empire. But the mother in her, the part that had watched security footage at 3 a.m. and felt her heart break at her own absence from her son's life, that part saw something more complicated. This wasn't just about hiring effective help. This was about trust, about letting someone into her carefully controlled world who operated on completely different principles than the ones she'd built her success on. I need to think about this, Vivian said. Daniel, I appreciate your honesty. Dr. Patel, thank you for your assessment. Can we continue this discussion after I've had time to review all the implications? Of course, Dr. Patel said. But Ms. Cross, don't think too long. Theo's in a critical window developmentally. Momentum matters. Daniel nodded, accepting the dismissal. I should get to work. Ms. Cross, whatever you decide, I understand. I never should have started this without your explicit permission. That's on me. He moved toward the service elevator, but Vivian called after him. Daniel? He turned back. Why did you start? Really? He was quiet for several heartbeats, his hand resting on the elevator call button. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief and stubborn hope. Because I made a promise to my wife the night before she died. She was worried about all the kids we'd been working with, worried about who would help them when she was gone. And I told her that I would. That as long as I had knowledge and hands that worked, I'd find ways to help kids like Theo. Even if it was just one kid at a time. Even if nobody ever knew. He met Vivian's eyes directly. Your son needed help. I could give it. The math was that simple. The elevator arrived, doors sliding open with a soft chime. Daniel stepped inside and disappeared, leaving Vivian and Dr. Patel standing in the hallway. Hire him, Dr. Patel said quietly. Whatever it costs, whatever paperwork it requires. That man is exactly what Theo needs. Even though he's not properly licensed? Licensure measures knowledge, acquisition, and legal compliance. It doesn't measure heart, dedication, or the kind of intuitive understanding that comes from lived experience. Dr. Patel gathered her bag. I've been practicing for 23 years, Vivian. I can tell you with absolute certainty that some of the best therapeutic relationships I've seen have been between patients and providers who defied conventional credentialing. What matters is competence, care, and results. Daniel Mercer has all three. After Dr. Patel left, Vivian returned to her office and did what she always did when facing a complex decision. She gathered more information. She pulled Daniel Mercer's full employment file, cross-referenced his credentials, verified his education with Hunter College, and confirmed his wife's professional background through medical licensing databases. Everything he'd told them was true. Sarah Mercer had been a respected pediatric physical therapist with an impressive track record. Daniel had indeed earned his degree and certifications, though his work experience was entirely under his wife's clinical supervision. The timeline matched Sarah's death 3 years ago, followed by Daniel's disappearance from professional life. Then Vivian did something she rarely allowed herself to do. She stopped researching and started remembering. 18 months ago, in the sterile hallway of Mount Sinai Hospital, a doctor had explained that Theo's recovery would require not just medical intervention, but emotional support, patience, and unwavering belief in his potential. Vivian had nodded, written notes on her tablet, and immediately begun researching the best specialists money could buy. She'd approached her son's trauma the way she approached everything, as a problem to be solved through strategic resource allocation. And she'd failed. Not because she'd chosen wrong specialists or inadequate equipment, but because she'd missed the essential human element that Daniel Mercer had provided without even being asked. Her intercom buzzed. Ms. Cross, your 9 o'clock is here. Vivian glanced at her schedule. The Dubai investors. She'd completely forgotten. Tell them I need to reschedule, something urgent with my son. Shall I suggest an alternative time? Next week, and clear my afternoon. I have personal business to attend to. There was a notable pause. In 12 years, Vivian had never voluntarily cleared her schedule for personal reasons. Yes, Ms. Cross. I'll handle it. Vivian made 3 phone calls. The first was to her attorney, requesting immediate consultation on employment law and liability coverage for medical consultants. The second was to her head of HR, initiating a formal hiring process for a specialized care position. The third was to Dr. Patel's office, asking for documentation of everything that would be required to legally bring Daniel into Theo's care team. Then she did something even more unprecedented. She left her office at 10 a.m. on a Friday, got in her car, and drove across the city following the address listed on Daniel Mercer's employment file. The neighborhood was a 40-minute drive from her penthouse, but might as well have been another planet. Modest apartment buildings with window unit air conditioners, small businesses with hand-painted signs, children playing in a pocket park with equipment that had seen better decades. This was working-class New York, the kind Vivian saw from car windows but never actually entered. Daniel's building was a 6-story walk-up with faded brick and a security door that didn't quite close properly. Vivian checked the directory. Mercer, 4B. She climbed stairs that smelled of cooking and cleaning products, her heels clicking on worn linoleum. She knocked. Footsteps approached, and the door opened to reveal Daniel, still in his work uniform, surprise evident on his face. Ms. Cross, is everything okay? Is Theo... Theo's fine. May I come in? Daniel hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but stepped aside. It's not much. We weren't expecting company. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, Vivian guessed, with a combined living room and kitchen area that couldn't have been more than 400 square feet. But it was meticulously clean and surprisingly warm. Children's drawings covered one wall in a carefully arranged gallery. A bookshelf overflowed with therapy manuals, medical texts, and children's books. A small table held art supplies organized in neat containers. And in the corner, working intently on what appeared to be a crayon drawing, was a little girl who had to be Lila. She didn't look up when Vivian entered. Her focus remained absolute on her work, her hand moving in precise, controlled strokes. She was small for 8 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and her father's serious expression. Lila, Daniel said gently, we have a visitor. Can you say hello? Lila's hand paused. She glanced up briefly, made eye contact for perhaps half a second, then returned to her drawing without speaking. Lila doesn't talk much, Daniel explained, his voice carrying the patient tone of someone who'd explained this many times. She communicates in other ways. Through her art, Vivian said, moving closer to examine the drawing. It was remarkably sophisticated for a child. Precise lines, careful attention to proportion, vivid color choices that created genuine emotional impact. The subject was a garden full of butterflies, each one rendered in meticulous detail. She's very talented. She sees the world differently. More detail, less noise, I guess you'd say. Daniel moved to the small kitchen area. Can I offer you anything? Coffee? I'm afraid it's not the kind you're probably used to. Coffee would be fine, thank you. While Daniel prepared coffee in a pot that had seen years of service, Vivian studied the apartment more closely. Medical equipment, a specialized cushion, textured mats, sensory toys, all well used but carefully maintained. A calendar on the wall marked with color-coded appointments. A whiteboard with daily schedules broken down into 15-minute increments. This was the home of someone who'd learned to manage complex medical and developmental needs on a budget that probably didn't allow for margin of error. Everything had its place. Everything had its purpose. There was no waste, no excess, but also no sense of deprivation. Just efficiency born of necessity and love. You tracked me down at home, Daniel said, handing her a mug of coffee. I'm guessing this isn't a social call. I want to hire you officially as Theo's therapeutic specialist, working under Dr. Patel's supervision. Competitive salary, benefits, flexible hours that accommodate Lila's needs. Vivian sipped the coffee. It was actually quite good. I've already spoken with my legal team about liability coverage and proper documentation. Daniel sat down heavily on the worn couch. Ms. Cross, I appreciate the offer, but what? This solves every problem you mentioned. You'd be working legitimately in your field, using your knowledge and skills, helping Theo. What's the objection? The objection is that I know how this works. You hire me, pay me well, and suddenly I owe you. My judgment becomes compromised because you're my employer. Theo stops being a kid I'm helping and becomes my job security. Daniel set his own coffee down untouched. I've seen it happen in clinical settings. The power dynamic poisons the care relationship. Vivian absorbed this, recognizing the legitimate concern. What if I guaranteed you complete therapeutic autonomy? Your treatment decisions would be yours, reviewed only by Dr. Patel for medical oversight. You'd really let someone you barely know make decisions about your son's care without approval? I'd really let someone who's proven they care about my son's well-being make professional judgments in their area of expertise, yes. Even though I'm not properly licensed? Even though. Dr. Patel says you're as skilled as licensed therapists she knows. I've seen the results. Credentials matter, but outcomes matter more. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, his expression impossible to read. Why are you really doing this? The question caught Vivian off guard. Because Theo needs you. But why do you care? You didn't even know I was working with him until yesterday. You could have fired me, reported me, made me disappear with one phone call. Instead, you're here offering me a job. Why? Vivian found herself answering with more honesty than she'd intended. Because last night I watched security footage of you with my son, and I realized he laughs with you. Really laughs. And then I reviewed 3 months of footage and saw that you've been documenting his care more thoroughly than specialists I pay 6 figures. And then this morning, I watched you help him stand for 33 seconds, which is impossible according to every medical assessment I've received. She paused. And because somewhere in all of that, I realized that I've been so focused on managing my son's disability that I forgot to celebrate his abilities. You remembered. So yes, I'm here offering you a job because I'm finally admitting that I need help giving my son what money can't buy. The silence stretched between them. From the corner, the soft scratch of Lila's crayon provided the only sound. I need to think about it, Daniel said finally. This isn't just about me. Lila's routine, her stability, I can't disrupt that without careful planning. I understand. Take whatever time you need. Can I ask you something? Daniel's voice was quieter now. Last night, when you saw me with Theo, were you angry? Vivian considered the question carefully. I was shocked, confused, maybe a little threatened, if I'm being honest. Here was this stranger providing comfort to my son in ways I'd failed to. But angry? No. How could I be angry at someone for caring about my child? A lot of parents would be, are. That's why I stopped volunteering at most places. Parents reporting me for getting too close to their kids, for overstepping, for making them feel inadequate. Daniel's hands curled into fists. It's like there's this assumption that if you care too much and you're not family, you must have ulterior motives. Do you? Have ulterior motives? Yeah. I want to help kids who got dealt a bad hand. I want to honor my wife's memory by continuing the work she loved. And I want my daughter to grow up seeing that people who are different, whether it's physically, neurologically, whatever, deserve the same dedication and respect as everyone else. He met her eyes directly. Those are my ulterior motives. If that's not good enough, then we don't have anything more to discuss. Vivian stood, recognizing that pushing further would be counterproductive. Think about my offer. Talk to Dr. Patel if you have questions about the medical oversight structure. And Daniel? She pulled out her business card, writing her personal cell number on the back. This isn't my assistant's number. It's mine. Use it if you need anything, regardless of whether you accept the position. She moved toward the door, then paused beside Lila, who was adding final touches to her butterfly garden. Your drawing is beautiful, Lila. Thank you for letting me see it. Lila didn't respond verbally, but her hand paused, and Vivian caught the tiniest upward curve at the corner of the girl's mouth. Daniel walked Vivian to the door. I'll give you an answer by Monday. That's fair. And Daniel? For what it's worth, I think your wife would be proud of the promise you've kept. His expression cracked slightly, emotion showing through. I hope so. I really hope so. Vivian descended the stairs and returned to her car, but instead of driving back to her office, she found herself sitting in the parking lot, engine idling, staring at nothing. She'd built an empire by recognizing value and acquiring it strategically. She'd climbed to the top of a cutthroat industry by being smarter, faster, more ruthless than her competitors. She'd learned to evaluate people in seconds, to spot weakness and leverage it, to control every variable in every transaction, and none of that had prepared her to simply ask for help. Daniel Mercer had something she needed and couldn't buy: genuine care for her son untainted by financial motivation. The moment she formalized their relationship with employment contracts and salary negotiations, that purity would be compromised. She knew it. He knew it. But the alternative was sending him back to cleaning floors while Theo asked for him every day. Her phone buzzed. 14 missed calls. 37 emails marked urgent. Her empire demanding her attention, her absence creating vacuums that others would rush to fill. Vivian silenced the phone and drove home instead. She found Theo in the living room with Mrs. Chen, working on schoolwork at the accessible desk they'd had custom designed. He looked up when she entered, surprise lighting his face. "Mom? You're home?" "I cleared my schedule. I thought maybe we could spend the day together." "Really? The whole day?" The desperate hope in his voice broke something in Vivian's chest. "The whole day. What would you like to do?" Theo thought carefully, as if afraid the wrong answer might make the offer disappear. Could we watch a movie? Together? Like we used to?" Such a small request, such a devastating reminder of how much she'd missed. "Absolutely. You pick the movie. I'll make popcorn." "You'll make popcorn?" Mrs. Chen looked as shocked as Theo. "Ms. Cross, I can—" "No, I'll make it." Vivian moved toward the kitchen, then paused. "Mrs. Chen, can I ask you something? How long have you known about Daniel helping Theo?" The older woman's expression grew careful. "From the beginning, Ms. Cross. I was there when he first showed me better lifting techniques, when he offered to help with Theo's exercises. I should have told you directly, but what?" But Theo was happy, really happy, for the first time in months, and Daniel's methods were working. I thought— She trailed off, uncertain. "You thought I'd say no," Vivian finished. Mrs. Chen nodded reluctantly. "You're a good mother, Miss Cross, but you're also very protective. I was afraid you'd see danger where there was only help." It was perhaps the most honest thing Mrs. Chen had ever said to her, and it was completely accurate. "You were probably right," Vivian admitted. "I would have said no. I would have seen the liability, the lack of credentials, the risk. I would have missed what actually mattered. And now? Now I'm trying to make it right. I've offered Daniel a formal position on Theo's care team." Mrs. Chen's face lit up. "He accepted? He's thinking about it. He's worried about the power dynamic, about compromising his judgment if I'm his employer. That's very like him. He cares more about doing right than doing well." Mrs. Chen smiled. "He'll accept, Ms. Cross. He might need time to convince himself, but he'll accept. Because Theo needs him, and Daniel can't say no to a child who needs him." Vivian made popcorn, slightly burnt, because it had been months since she'd used the stove for anything besides reheating Mrs. Chen's leftovers. She brought it to the living room where Theo had queued up an animated movie about dragons, and they settled together on the couch, Theo tucked against her side in a way he hadn't been since before the accident. Halfway through the movie, Theo said quietly, "Mom, are you mad at Daniel?" "No, sweetheart. Why would you think that?" "Because everyone came to watch this morning, and Daniel looks scared. I don't want him to get in trouble because of me." Vivian hugged him closer. "Daniel's not in trouble, I promise. I needed to understand what he was doing with you, to make sure it was safe and helping you get better." "It is helping. I'm getting so much stronger. Daniel says maybe by summer I can try walking with just the walker, no wheelchair for short distances." "And you believe him?" "Daniel doesn't lie. He says even hard truths, like when he tells me some things might not ever get all the way better. But he also says I'm stronger than I think, and I should always try." Theo tilted his head to look up at her. "Do you believe him?" Did she? Vivian thought about the security footage, the meticulous documentation, the 33 seconds of standing that should have been impossible. She thought about a man who'd lost everything but kept his promise to a dying wife. She thought about her own failure to see what was right in front of her. "Yes," she said, "I believe him." "Good, because he's my favorite helper, and I'd be sad if he went away." They finished the movie, Vivian present in a way she couldn't remember being for months. Not checking her phone, not mentally reviewing presentations, not calculating next quarter's projections. Just watching dragons fly across the screen and feeling her son breathe against her side. That evening, after Theo was asleep and Mrs. Chen had gone home, Vivian returned to her office and did something she'd never done before. She looked up the community center Daniel had mentioned, the one where he volunteered. It wasn't hard to find. A listing for Harbor Heights Community Center, their website announcing after-school programs, senior activities, and adaptive sports leagues. On a whim, Vivian grabbed her keys and drove across the city for the second time that day. Harbor Heights occupied a converted warehouse in a neighborhood that real estate developers called emerging and residents called forgotten. The building's exterior showed its age, worn brick, faded paint, windows protected by bars. But inside, Vivian found something unexpected. The main room had been transformed into a multi-purpose space with careful attention and obvious love. One section held exercise mats and adaptive equipment. Another had tables for crafts and homework. A small library filled one corner. Children's artwork covered every available wall space. And in the center of it all, Daniel Mercer sat on the floor with a boy of maybe 10, patiently guiding the child's legs through assisted exercises, while two other children watched and waited their turn. "Keep your core tight, Marcus," Daniel was saying. "That's it? Feel how your balance is better when your stomach muscles are working?" "It's hard," Marcus complained, but he was smiling. "It is hard. That's how you know you're building something real." Daniel caught sight of Vivian standing in the doorway and nearly lost his grip on Marcus's leg. "Ms. Cross!" The children turned to stare at her. Vivian suddenly felt overdressed in her tailored suit and designer shoes, acutely aware that she didn't belong in this space. "I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just curious." An older woman emerged from a small office, moving with the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to running on limited resources. "Can I help you?" "I'm Vivian Cross. I was hoping to speak with Daniel, but I can see he's busy." "Vivian Cross?" The woman's eyes widened. "The Vivian Cross? From Cross Industries?" "Yes." "I'm Maria Santos, Center Director. We're honored. Are you here about the building sale?" Vivian had no idea what building sale she meant, but filed the information away. "Actually, I'm here about Daniel. He works for me, and I wanted to see—" She trailed off, not sure how to explain stalking her employee to his volunteer gig. "You wanted to see if he's really as good as he seems," Maria finished, understanding dawning on her face. "He is. Better, actually. These kids—" She gestured at the children Daniel was working with. "They can't afford private therapy. Most of them wait months for appointments at public clinics that give them 20 minutes with overwhelmed therapists. Daniel gives them 2 hours every Tuesday and Thursday, completely free. He builds equipment from donated materials, teaches parents exercises they can do at home, makes every single child feel like they matter." "How long has he been volunteering here?" 2 years. He showed up one day, said he'd heard we had kids who needed help, and asked if he could volunteer. I thought he'd last maybe a month. Most volunteers burn out fast. But Daniel?" Maria's expression softened with genuine affection. "He's never missed a week, not once. Even brought his daughter a few times, though he mostly comes after her bedtime." Vivian watched Daniel help Marcus to his feet, celebrating the boy's improved balance, then immediately turn attention to the next waiting child. He moved with the same care and precision she'd seen with Theo, giving each child his complete focus. "He told me he made a promise to his wife," Vivian said quietly. "Sarah. She used to volunteer here too, before she got sick. They were a team. She'd handle the complex cases, he'd support and assist. After she died, I thought we'd lost both of them. But Daniel came back, said he couldn't let Sarah's work die with her." Maria wiped at her eyes. "These kids, Ms. Cross, they're invisible to most people. Too poor, too complicated, too time-consuming. But Daniel sees them, every single one." "Teacher Daniel," one of the children called. "Can you help me with the new exercise?" "Be right there, Jen." He turned to Vivian, his expression uncertain. "Did you need to talk to me? I can take a break." "No, don't interrupt for me. Vivian struggled to find words. "I just wanted to understand better. Who you are. What drives you. Daniel glanced at the children waiting for him, then back at Vivian. Something in his expression shifted, became more determined. I'm a father who lost his partner. I'm a person with knowledge that can help people. And I believe that if you can do something to make someone's life better, and you choose not to, you're complicit in their suffering. That's who I am, Miss Cross. That's what drives me. Now, if you'll excuse me, these kids don't have all night. He returned to his work, and Vivian stood watching for another 20 minutes, seeing her employee, her janitor, her liability, her unexpected answer, give of himself with no expectation of recognition or reward. This was who she'd be bringing into her son's life officially. This man who cleaned buildings by day and performed miracles by night. This man who kept promises to the dead and saw value in the invisible. This man who was making her question everything she'd built her empire on. Maria appeared at her elbow. You said something about a building sale? I have no idea what you're referring to. Ah, then you should know. We're losing this space. The building's been sold to a developer who's converting it to luxury condos. We have until June to find a new location, which realistically means we're closing. There's nowhere else in this neighborhood we can afford. Vivian processed this information with the quick calculation that had made her fortune. How much would it cost to buy the building? Maria laughed, but it was bitter. More than a community center operating on bake sales and grant scraps could ever afford. Why? Just curious. Vivian pulled out her phone and made a note. What's the address here? After she left the community center, Vivian made one more stop before heading home. She drove to the cemetery listed in Sarah Mercer's obituary, finding it despite the late hour. The gates were locked, but she could see through the bars to the modest headstones beyond. She stood there in the dark, thinking about a woman she'd never met who dedicated her life to helping children others had given up on. Thinking about the man who'd loved her enough to carry on her work at great personal cost. Thinking about the promise that had led Daniel Mercer to her son's bedside. Her phone rang. Her COO calling about the Tokyo merger. For the first time in her professional life, Vivian didn't answer. She silenced the phone and drove home through Manhattan's glittering night, her mind full of the day's revelations. When she finally crawled into bed at midnight, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work, her phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. I'll accept your offer. For Theo. But we do this right. Full documentation, medical oversight, no shortcuts. And if at any point I think the employment relationship is compromising the care relationship, I walk. No hard feelings, no legal complications. Those are my terms. Danielle. Vivian read the message 3 times, then typed her response. Agreed. We do this right. Welcome to the team. She set the phone aside and stared at her ceiling, thinking about a little boy who'd learned to stand for 33 seconds, and the man who'd taught him it was possible. Tomorrow she'd call her lawyers and start the paperwork. Tomorrow she'd begin restructuring Theo's care team to include Daniel officially. But tonight, she just lay in the dark and admitted to herself that somewhere in the past 48 hours, her carefully controlled world had tilted on its axis. And for the first time in 18 months, she felt something that had been missing since a drunk driver had stolen her son's ability to walk. She felt hope. The paperwork took 2 weeks to finalize. Contracts reviewed by 3 separate attorneys, liability insurance secured through specialized medical malpractice carriers, formal protocols established with Dr. Patel's neurological practice serving as the supervising medical entity. Vivian's HR department had never processed a hire quite like Daniel Mercer. His position fell somewhere between medical consultant, therapeutic specialist, and something that had no official job title because it had never existed before. Daniel started officially on a Monday morning in late March, arriving at the penthouse at 8 a.m. sharp, dressed in clothes that Vivian suspected were his best attempt at business casual, khakis that had been carefully pressed, a button-down shirt that was slightly too large in the shoulders, shoes that were clean but showed their age. He carried the same canvas bag she'd seen him use for months, now supplemented with a proper medical equipment case that Dr. Patel had provided. Vivian met him at the elevator, extending her hand. Welcome officially to the team. Daniel's handshake was firm, his palm calloused from years of manual labor. Thank you for this opportunity, Ms. Cross. I won't let you or Theo down. It's Vivian. We're colleagues now, not employer and janitor. Old habits, Daniel said with a slight smile. It'll take some getting used to. They walked together toward Theo's wing, and Vivian found herself noting details she'd missed before. The way Daniel unconsciously cataloged the space as they moved through it, his eyes tracking sight lines and safety hazards with professional assessment. The careful way he carried himself, as though perpetually aware of his body's position in relation to fragile things. The quiet competence that radiated from him like heat. Theo was already awake and vibrating with excitement when they entered his room. "Daniel, you're here! Are we really going to work together every day now?" 3 days a week to start, Daniel corrected gently, setting down his equipment. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Dr. Patel will still handle your Tuesday and Thursday sessions, and will coordinate our approaches to make sure everything works together. But 3 days is more than before. It is, which means we can work on some bigger goals. Daniel pulled out a notebook, not the worn personal journal Vivian had seen before, but a new professional binder with Theo's name printed neatly on the cover. "I've been putting together a 12-week progression plan. Want to see?" Theo nodded eagerly, and Daniel opened the binder to reveal pages of carefully structured goals, exercises, and milestones. Vivian moved closer to look over his shoulder, impressed despite herself by the level of detail. Each week had specific objectives with measurable outcomes, contingency plans for setbacks, and notes on how to adjust for Theo's response patterns. Week 1 through 4 were focusing on strength building and endurance, Daniel explained, pointing to the relevant sections. "Your standing time has been improving, but we need to make sure your muscles can sustain that effort without fatigue. Week 5 through 8, we start introducing assisted walking with the parallel bars Dr. Patel has approved for installation." He looked up at Vivian. "Those should arrive this week, correct?" "Wednesday," Vivian confirmed. She'd ordered the equipment the day after Daniel accepted her offer, sparing no expense for the adjustable therapeutic walking bars that would give Theo safe support as he relearned ambulation. Perfect. And weeks 9 through 12, if everything goes according to plan, we transition to walker-assisted movement with a goal of independent standing for 60 consecutive seconds. Daniel's finger traced the timeline. "Now, these are goals, not guarantees. Your body gets to decide the actual pace, Theo. We're just giving it the best possible chance to remember what it knows how to do." "What if I can't do it?" Theo asked, his voice small. "What if we try really hard and my legs still don't work right?" Daniel closed the binder and gave Theo his full attention. "Then we adjust the plan. We find what does work and we build from there. But Theo, listen to me. You've already done things the doctors said would take 6 months, and you did them in 3. You've got more fight in you than anyone I've ever worked with. So yeah, we're setting ambitious goals. But I've seen what you can do when you believe in yourself. I'm betting on you, buddy." Theo's expression transformed, doubt giving way to determination. "Okay, let's do it." They began the session, and Vivian stayed to watch, fascinated by the dynamic that had developed between therapist and patient. Daniel pushed Theo, there was no question about that, but he did it with such careful attention to the boy's limits that it never felt cruel or excessive. When Theo struggled, Daniel adjusted. When Theo succeeded, Daniel celebrated but immediately moved to the next challenge, never letting victory become complacency. "Core tight, yes, exactly like that," Daniel encouraged, as Theo held a modified plank position, his body trembling with effort. 15 seconds. You've got this. Breathe through it. 20 seconds. Beautiful. 25. And rest. Theo collapsed onto the mat, breathing hard but grinning. That was longer than last time. 10 seconds longer. That's huge progress. Daniel made notes in the binder, then glanced at Vivian. "Do you want to try the next exercise with us? It works better with 2 supporters." Vivian hesitated. "I don't want to interfere with your professional work." "You're not interfering, you're participating. There's a difference." Daniel stood, offering his hand to help her down to the mat. "Besides, at some point, Theo's going to need to practice these exercises when I'm not here. Better you learn the proper technique now." So Vivian found herself kneeling on the therapy mat beside her son, following Daniel's instructions on how to support Theo's legs during resistance training, where to place her hands to provide stability without taking over the work his muscles needed to do. It was harder than it looked, requiring constant attention and micro-adjustments. "You're doing great," Daniel told her after 15 minutes. "Most parents either over-support, basically doing the exercise for their kid, or under support and risk injury. You're finding the balance. I had a good teacher, Vivian said, and was rewarded by Daniel's quick smile. They worked for another 40 minutes before Daniel called time. That's enough for today. We pushed some new boundaries, which means your body needs recovery time, Theo. Mrs. Chen, he should ice his knees for 15 minutes, then the usual stretching routine before bed tonight. Mrs. Chen, who'd been observing from her usual chair, nodded approvingly. Of course, you've worked very hard today, Theo. Can we do the standing test? Theo asked eagerly. I want to see if I can beat my record. Not today. We introduced 3 new exercises, and your nervous system is processing a lot of information. If we test now and you can't hold it as long because you're fatigued, you'll feel discouraged. Better to rest and test fresh. Daniel ruffled Theo's hair affectionately. Besides, we've got 3 sessions a week now. Plenty of chances to break records. After helping Theo transition to his wheelchair and going over the evening care instructions with Mrs. Chen, Daniel packed his equipment and followed Vivian out to the hallway. She walked with him toward the main elevator. No more service entrances for him now. You were right to stay, Daniel said as they walked. Theo lights up when you're in the room. He works harder because he wants to impress you. I've missed so much, Vivian admitted. I kept telling myself I was building the company for his future, making sure he'd be taken care of, but really I was just hiding. It was easier to write checks than to sit on that mat and watch him struggle. You're here now. That's what matters. The elevator arrived and Daniel stepped inside, then held the door. Vivian, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really hire me? Not the official reason. I know that's about Theo's care. But what made you decide to trust me after I'd been working in your home for months without your knowledge? Vivian considered the question carefully. You want the truth? Always. Because I watched you with those kids at the community center, giving everything you had with no expectation of recognition or reward. And I realized that kind of dedication can't be bought or contracted. It can only be honored. She paused. And because my son laughs with you in a way he hasn't laughed with me in 18 months, I'd be a fool to let that go over something as meaningless as credentials. Daniel held her gaze for a moment, something shifting in his expression. Thank you. That means more than you know. The elevator doors started to close, but Vivian held them. Daniel, one more thing. That community center, Harbor Heights. Maria mentioned they're losing their building. Yeah, developer bought it out from under them. It's a shame. Those kids don't have anywhere else to go. His expression darkened with frustration. Maria's been trying to find a new location, but the neighborhood's being gentrified. Everything's either too expensive or too small. What if I bought them a building? Daniel's eyes widened. What? I have capital. I'd been planning to invest in a downtown development project. What if instead I bought or built a permanent home for Harbor Heights, properly equipped, ADA accessible, space for expansion? Would that be something Maria would want? Would she want... Daniel actually laughed, the sound startled and genuine. Vivian, that would change everything for those kids, but that's got to be millions of dollars. I spend millions of dollars on things that matter far less, Vivian said simply. Email me Maria's contact information. I'll have my people reach out to discuss details. The elevator doors tried to close again. This time Daniel let them, but Vivian caught the expression on his face before he disappeared. Surprise, gratitude, and something that might have been the beginning of respect. The 12-week plan progressed better than anyone dared hope. By week 3, Theo was holding standing position for 45 consecutive seconds. By week 5, when the parallel bars were installed and secured in the specially reinforced section of the living room, he took his first assisted steps in 18 months, 3 shaky, trembling steps that left everyone in the room in tears. I walked, Theo whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Did you see, Mom? I walked. I saw, sweetheart. Vivian was openly crying, not caring that Mrs. Chen could see, not caring about anything except her son's face radiating pure joy. You were amazing. Daniel documented everything with photos and video, his own eyes suspiciously bright. 3 steps. Next week we're going for 4. By week 7, Theo managed 8 steps. By week 9, he was walking the full length of the parallel bars, 15 feet that represented more progress than Vivian had dared imagine possible. Dr. Patel reviewed all the documentation with increasing amazement, admitting to Vivian during one of their coordination meetings that she'd never seen recovery progress this rapidly. "Whatever Daniel's doing, it's working," Dr. Patel said, reviewing the latest mobility assessments. Theo's proprioception has improved dramatically, his muscle tone is approaching normal ranges for his age, and his confidence, that's the real miracle. He believes he can do this. "Because Daniel believes he can," Vivian said. "It's more than belief. It's expertise combined with genuine care. That's rare in medicine. We're trained to maintain professional distance, to avoid emotional attachment, but sometimes attachment is exactly what healing requires." Dr. Patel closed her tablet. "You made the right call hiring him, Vivian." The validation felt good, but Vivian found herself worrying about things she'd never worried about before. She started coming home earlier, arranging her schedule around Theo's therapy sessions, learning the exercises so she could help with evening practice. She brought work home instead of staying at the office until midnight. She had breakfast with Theo every morning, their waffle tradition becoming a ritual neither of them would miss. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Vivian began to notice Daniel, not as an employee or a therapeutic specialist, but as a person. The way he showed up 15 minutes early for every session, using the time to prepare equipment and review his notes. The careful way he spoke to Theo, never talking down but also never expecting more comprehension than a 6-year-old could manage. The patience he showed when Theo had bad days, when pain or frustration made progress impossible, and they had to settle for maintenance instead of advancement. On a Thursday in mid-May, Vivian arrived home to find Daniel sitting on the floor outside Theo's room, his head in his hands. It was 3 p.m., not his scheduled day, which immediately sent alarm bells ringing. "Daniel, what's wrong? Is Theo okay?" He looked up, and she saw exhaustion written in every line of his face. "Theo's fine. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be here on an off day. He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. Lila had a bad morning at school, really bad, full meltdown, and the teacher called saying I needed to pick her up immediately. I got her calmed down and home, but my backup sitter can't come until 5, and I couldn't miss Theo's session entirely, so I brought her with me, Mrs. Chen said it would be okay, but now Lila's overwhelmed by the new environment, and I can't help Theo properly while managing her needs, and He pressed his palms against his eyes. "I'm sorry, this is unprofessional. I should have just canceled the session." "Where's Lila now?" "In the kitchen with Mrs. Chen. She's drawing, which usually helps her regulate, but this is too many new stimuli. I need to get her home." "Let me help," Vivian said immediately. "What does Lila need?" Daniel looked at her with something like desperation. "You don't have to." "I'm not offering out of obligation. I'm offering because you need help and I can provide it. What does Lila need to feel safe in a new environment?" He took a shaky breath. "Quiet space, no sudden movements or loud noises. If people talk to her, simple sentences without a lot of questions. And her comfort object. She has a stuffed rabbit she carries everywhere." "Does she have the rabbit now?" "Yes." "Then let's start there." Vivian stood, offering Daniel her hand. "Come on. We'll figure this out together." They found Lila in the kitchen, sitting at the counter with Mrs. Chen hovering nearby, clearly trying to help but uncertain how. The little girl was drawing with fierce concentration, her whole body rigid with stress. The stuffed rabbit sat beside her paper, one of Lila's hands occasionally reaching out to touch its worn ear. Vivian approached slowly, making sure Lila could see her coming. "Hello, Lila. I'm Vivian. Thank you for sharing your beautiful drawings with us." Lila didn't respond, but her hand moved faster across the paper. "I have a space that might be quieter for you," Vivian continued, keeping her voice calm and even. "It's my office. There's a big window with a view of the city, and nobody will bother you there. Would you like to see it?" Lila's hand paused. She glanced at her father. "It's okay, sweetheart," Daniel said softly. "Vivian's a friend. Her office is really nice. You can bring your drawing." After a long moment, Lila gathered her papers and crayons, tucked the rabbit under her arm, and slid off the stool. She didn't take Vivian's offered hand, but she followed when Vivian led the way to the home office. The space was exactly as Vivian had described: quiet, high up, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view. Lila stopped in the doorway, her eyes widening as she took in the cityscape beyond the glass. "You can draw at my desk if you'd like," Vivian offered, "or there's a chair by the window with a good table for art supplies." Lila chose the window seat, immediately setting up her materials with precise organization. Within minutes, she was absorbed in her work, the tension in her small shoulders beginning to ease. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching his daughter with obvious relief. "Thank you. You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did. You're helping my son. Let me help your daughter. It's that simple." Vivian moved toward the door, giving Lila space. "Now, you have a session to finish. I'll stay here with Lila. If she needs you, I'll come get you immediately." "You're sure?" "Completely sure. Go. Theo's probably wondering where you disappeared to." Daniel hesitated a moment longer, then nodded. "Lila, sweetheart, I'm going to work with Theo. You're safe here with Vivian. She'll take good care of you." Lila didn't look up from her drawing, but she made a small sound that might have been acknowledgement. After Daniel left, Vivian settled into a chair near Lila, but not too close, pulling out her tablet to review quarterly reports. For 20 minutes, they existed in companionable silence, Lila drawing and Vivian working. The only sounds, the scratch of crayon and the soft tap of Vivian's stylus on glass. Then Lila spoke. Her voice was so quiet, Vivian almost missed it. "Butterflies." Vivian looked up. "What about butterflies?" Lila held up her drawing. An intricate illustration of a butterfly with mathematically precise wing patterns, each section colored in complementary shades that created genuine artistic beauty. "That's extraordinary," Vivian said honestly. "You have a real gift, Lila." "Butterflies are symmetrical. They follow patterns. Patterns make sense." Lila returned to her work, adding details with intense focus. "People don't follow patterns. People are confusing." "They are," Vivian agreed. "People are very confusing sometimes. School is too many people, too loud, too many rules that don't make sense." Vivian set down her tablet, recognizing the trust Lila was offering by speaking at all. "What kind of rules don't make sense?" "The teacher says, raise your hand if you know the answer. But when I raise my hand every time, she says I need to give other kids a chance. But if I know the answer, why should I pretend I don't? That's lying." "That's not lying. That's called social politeness. And you're right. It doesn't make much logical sense." Lila looked up, surprise evident on her face. "You think it doesn't make sense too?" "I think a lot of social rules don't make sense when you examine them closely. We just get used to following them without thinking." Vivian smiled slightly. "My job requires a lot of social rules. Sometimes I hate every minute of it." "But you do it anyway?" "I do it anyway. Because even though the rules are confusing, the outcome I want, running my company, helping people, providing for my son, requires playing by those rules." Lila absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. "Daddy says I have to try school even though it's hard because education is important. But it's so hard. Everything is so loud and bright, and people want me to look at their faces all the time, and it makes my brain hurt." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." Lila started a new drawing, this one of what looked like a garden. "Daddy says my brain works different, not broken. But sometimes different feels like broken." The words hit Vivian like a physical blow. She thought about Theo saying something similar months ago, about how his legs felt broken, even though the doctors said they were just healing slowly. Different, damaged, broken. The vocabulary of children trying to make sense of bodies and minds that didn't work the way they were supposed to. "I don't think you're broken at all," Vivian said quietly. "I think you're exactly who you're meant to be. And I think the world is the broken thing for not making space for people whose brains work differently." Lila's hand paused mid-stroke. She looked at Vivian directly, real eye contact, sustained longer than Vivian had seen her manage before. "I like you," Lila said simply. Then she returned to her drawing, the conversation apparently concluded to her satisfaction. Vivian felt something warm bloom in her chest. She'd negotiated billion-dollar mergers and faced down hostile board members without breaking a sweat, But earning the approval of an 8-year-old autistic girl felt like a more significant achievement than any of those victories. When Daniel came to collect Lila an hour later, he found his daughter contentedly drawing while Vivian worked nearby, both of them comfortable in their shared silence. "How was she?" Daniel asked quietly. "Perfect. We had a nice talk about butterflies and social rules that don't make sense." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "She talked to you?" "Quite a bit, actually. She's brilliant, Daniel. Her perspective on the world is fascinating. Most people find her difficult. Teachers, other parents, they think she's rude or strange. Then most people are idiots." Vivian stood, moving to where Lila was finishing her latest drawing. "Lila, your dad's here. Thank you for spending the afternoon with me." Lila looked up, then carefully tore out her drawing and offered it to Vivian. "For you, because you understand about patterns." The gesture was so unexpected, so precious, that Vivian felt tears threaten. "Thank you. I'll treasure this. It's just a drawing." "It's not just anything. It's a gift from someone whose art I admire very much." Vivian accepted the paper carefully, treating it with the reverence usually reserved for original Picassos. Daniel helped Lila gather her supplies, his expression doing complicated things that Vivian couldn't quite interpret. As they walked toward the elevator, he turned back. "Vivian, thank you for understanding, for being kind to her. Most people don't take the time." "Most people are missing out," Vivian said simply. "She's welcome here anytime." After they left, Vivian stood holding Lila's drawing, looking at the precise mathematical beauty of the butterfly wings, and realized something had shifted. These people, this widowed father and his remarkable daughter, had somehow become more than employees or professional associates. They were becoming something that felt dangerously like family. The thought should have terrified her. Emotional attachment was a liability in business, a vulnerability enemies could exploit. But standing in her office, holding a child's drawing like it was the most valuable thing she owned, Vivian found she couldn't muster the fear she knew she should feel. The weeks that followed blurred together in a cascade of milestones and small miracles. Theo graduated from parallel bars to a walker, taking his first unassisted steps across the living room while everyone held their breath. Lila started coming to therapy sessions regularly, setting up her art station in Vivian's office, slowly growing comfortable in the space. Daniel's 12-week plan reached its conclusion, and they immediately started a new 16-week progression aimed at outdoor mobility and endurance. By the second week of June, Theo could walk 30 feet with his walker before needing rest. By the third week, 40 feet. By the fourth week, he was asking when he could try without the walker at all. "Not yet," Daniel said firmly but kindly. "Your strength is there, but your balance isn't quite ready. Another 3 weeks, then we'll test it." "But Daniel," "Theo." Daniel's voice carried that particular blend of warmth and authority that Theo couldn't resist. "I know you want to run before you can walk, but we do this right, or we don't do it at all. Your body's done amazing things, but it needs time to consolidate the gains. Pushing too fast means risking injury that could set us back months. Trust me on this." Theo did trust him. That was obvious in everything from the way he followed Daniel's instructions without argument to the way his face lit up when Daniel arrived for sessions. And Vivian was beginning to understand that trust wasn't just about Daniel's expertise. It was about Daniel showing up, consistently and completely, in a way that promised permanence in a world that had proven devastatingly unpredictable. On the last Friday in June, Vivian came home at 5 p.m. as had become her habit, expecting to find the usual post-session routine. Instead, she found the living room empty and voices coming from Theo's room, raised voices, which immediately sent alarm bells ringing. She moved quickly down the hallway, pushing open Theo's door to find Daniel and Dr. Patel standing on opposite sides of Theo's wheelchair, their body language tense with disagreement. Theo sat between them, his expression caught between fear and confusion. "What's going on?" Vivian demanded. "Doctor." Patel turned to her, frustration evident. "I'm trying to explain to Daniel that we need to slow down Theo's progression. His last MRI shows some inflammation around the original injury site. Nothing dangerous, but concerning. I want to reduce therapy sessions from 3 to 2 per week and pull back on the intensity of exercises." And I'm trying to explain, Daniel said, his voice tight with controlled emotion, that pulling back now would be catastrophic for Theo's confidence. He's been working toward unassisted walking for 3 months. He's right on the edge of breakthrough. If we stop now, he'll internalize it as failure. His medical safety trumps his emotional needs, Dr. Patel countered. That's basic clinical ethics. His emotional needs are part of his medical safety. You can't separate them. Daniel turned to Vivian. I'm not saying we ignore the inflammation. I'm saying we adjust technique to reduce stress on that area while maintaining momentum. There are ways to work around this without stopping completely. And I'm saying that inflammation indicates we've pushed too hard. Continuing could cause permanent damage. Dr. Patel crossed her arms. Ms. Cross, I need you to make a decision here. As the supervising physician, my recommendation is clear. Vivian looked between them, feeling the weight of the choice. Dr. Patel represented medical authority, years of training, the kind of credentialed expertise that courts would favor if anything went wrong. Daniel represented practical knowledge, intuition earned through experience, and an understanding of Theo's specific needs that no amount of formal education could replicate. Show me the MRI, she said to Dr. Patel. The doctor pulled out her tablet, displaying the images and explaining the areas of concern with technical precision. The inflammation was there, undeniable in the imaging, clustered around the L4-L5 vertebrae where the original trauma had occurred. What would cause this? Vivian asked. Overuse. The muscles surrounding the injury site are working harder than they have in 18 months. Some inflammatory response is normal, but this level suggests we've exceeded optimal therapeutic load. Vivian turned to Daniel. What's your assessment? I see the inflammation. I'm not denying it exists or that it's concerning. Daniel pulled out his documentation, the meticulous notes he'd kept for months. But look at the timeline. The inflammation appeared after we introduced the new pelvic stabilization exercises 2 weeks ago. Those exercises specifically target the lower lumbar region. If we eliminate those exercises and replace them with alternative techniques that achieve similar results through different muscle activation patterns, we can reduce stress on that area while maintaining overall progression. That's speculation, Dr. Patel said. We can't know that would work without testing it, and testing it risks making the inflammation worse. Everything in medicine is controlled risk assessment, Daniel countered. And yes, it's speculation based on 18 years of practical experience watching bodies respond to graduated therapeutic intervention. My wife treated hundreds of cases like this. I know what works. Your wife is dead. The words came out harsher than Dr. Patel clearly intended, and she immediately looked apologetic. I'm sorry, that was uncalled for. But Daniel, you have to understand, your experience, no matter how extensive, doesn't change the fact that I'm legally responsible for Theo's medical outcomes. If I say we slow down and something goes wrong, I can defend that choice. If I let you continue over my medical recommendation and something goes wrong, I lose my license. The room fell into tense silence. Theo looked up at his mother, tears welling in his eyes. Are you going to make me stop? His voice was so small, so broken. Mom, please, I'm so close. I'm so close to walking by myself. Please don't make me stop. Vivian's heart fractured. She knelt beside Theo's wheelchair, taking his hands. Sweetheart, nobody wants to make you stop. We're just trying to figure out how to keep you safe while helping you get stronger. Daniel keeps me safe. He always keeps me safe. I know he does, baby. Then why won't you trust him? Theo's tears spilled over. Why does everyone need so many papers and rules? Daniel knows how to help me. Why isn't that enough? It was the question Vivian had been asking herself for weeks. Why wasn't Daniel's demonstrable competence enough? Why did the system demand credentials and licensure when practical results proved his worth? Why was she even hesitating when everything in her heart screamed that Daniel was right? Because one mistake could steal her son's future. Because maternal instinct and medical science sometimes pointed in different directions. Because she'd spent 18 months learning that money and power couldn't fix everything, and the helplessness of that lesson still haunted her. She stood, having made her decision. Dr. Patel, I appreciate your medical oversight and I respect your concern, but I'm going to trust Daniel on this. We continue sessions at current frequency, but we modify the specific exercises that seem to be causing inflammation. Daniel provides daily documentation that we review together, and if the inflammation worsens even slightly, we stop immediately and follow your recommendations. Vivian, I strongly advise against this. I know you do, and your advisement is noted, but this is my son, my choice, and my risk to take. She looked at Daniel. Can you guarantee that your modifications will work? No, I can't guarantee anything, but I can promise I'll monitor Theo's response with absolute vigilance, and I'll stop the first moment I see signs of harm. His gaze held hers steadily. I won't let anything happen to him, Vivian. I swear to you. Dr. Patel closed her tablet with a sharp snap. Fine, but I need everything documented in triplicate, and I want daily check-ins. The moment something looks wrong, we stop. Non-negotiable. Agreed, Daniel said immediately. After Dr. Patel left, her displeasure evident in every line of her posture, Vivian and Daniel stood in Theo's room, the tension slowly draining from the space. Thank you, Daniel said quietly, for trusting me. Don't make me regret it. I won't. But 3 days later, everything fell apart. It happened during an afternoon session. Daniel had introduced the modified exercises, carefully monitoring Theo's response, documenting everything. The session had gone well. Theo was in high spirits, his movements strong and confident. They'd been working on a new balance sequence, Daniel supporting Theo's weight as the boy practiced weight shifts that would eventually enable unassisted standing. Good, that's perfect, Daniel was saying. Feel how your core is engaging? That's exactly right. Now shift left. Theo shifted and something went wrong. His left leg cramped suddenly and violently, the muscle seizing with force that made Theo cry out. He crumpled, his legs buckling, and though Daniel caught him and controlled the fall, Theo's knee struck the edge of the therapy mat frame with a sickening crack. Theo! Daniel lowered him quickly to the floor, his hands already moving to assess the injury. Mrs. Chen, call Dr. Patel now! Theo was screaming, tears pouring down his face, clutching his knee while his left leg continued to spasm uncontrollably. Daniel worked fast, his hands finding the cramping muscle and applying pressure to release the spasm, talking constantly in that calm voice, even as his own face had gone white with fear. You're okay, buddy. You're okay. It's just a cramp. We're going to fix this. Breathe with me. Come on. Big breath in. Vivian came running, drawn by the screams, and the sight that met her nearly stopped her heart. Her son on the floor, Daniel hovering over him, blood seeping through Theo's pants from where his knee had struck the frame. What happened? She dropped beside them, her hands reaching for Theo. Muscle cramp. It came on too fast for him to control. He fell and hit his knee. Daniel's hands hadn't stopped their work, manually releasing the cramping muscle with practiced efficiency. The cramp's releasing. That's good. Theo, can you tell me where it hurts most? My knee, Theo sobbed. It hurts so bad, Daniel. Mrs. Chen appeared with Dr. Patel on the phone, and Daniel gave a rapid assessment while Vivian held Theo, her own hands shaking. Within 20 minutes, they were in a car headed to the emergency room, Dr. Patel meeting them there. The whole careful structure of Theo's care team mobilizing around a moment of crisis. The ER doctor ordered x-rays, examined the knee, tested the leg's range of motion. The verdict came back 2 hours later. No fracture, but significant bruising and a deep laceration that required stitches. The cramping had been caused by muscle fatigue combined with the inflammatory process Dr. Patel had warned about. Theo's muscles had been pushed past their sustainable limit. We'll need to immobilize the knee for at least a week, the ER doctor explained to Vivian while Theo dozed under the influence of pain medication. After that, very gentle physical therapy to restore range of motion. No weight-bearing exercises for at least 3 weeks, possibly longer depending on how the inflammation resolves. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of losing everything they'd gained. 3 weeks that might as well be 3 months in terms of Theo's psychological regression. Vivian nodded numbly, signed the discharge papers, and carried her sedated son to the car. Daniel followed silently, his expression devastated. They didn't speak during the drive home. What was there to say? He'd promised to keep Theo safe, and Theo had gotten hurt. The why and how didn't matter in the face of that simple, terrible fact. Back at the penthouse, they got Theo settled in bed, his knee wrapped and elevated, pain medication maintaining his drowsy peace. Mrs. Chen took up her post in the chair beside his bed, ready to monitor through the night. And then Vivian and Daniel stood in the hallway, facing each other across a distance that felt infinite. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, his voice hollow. "I thought I was being careful. I thought I was monitoring closely enough. I should have seen the signs that his muscles were fatiguing." "You should have," Vivian agreed. Her voice was cold, controlled, channeling all her fear into anger because anger was safer than the terror still flooding her system. "Dr. Patel warned us. She said the inflammation indicated we were pushing too hard. And I let you convince me otherwise." "Vivian, my son is lying in there with 7 stitches in his knee and orders not to bear weight for 3 weeks. 3 weeks that will undo months of progress. 3 weeks of watching him lose hope again because the adults around him made the wrong call." I know, and I'm sorry isn't good enough." The words burst out of her too loud in the quiet hallway, edged with the kind of panic she never let anyone see. "Sorry doesn't change the fact that I trusted you over trained medical professionals and my son got hurt. Sorry doesn't fix this." Daniel flinched as though she'd struck him. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to leave." The words came out flat, final. "I want you to pack your things and leave. I'll pay you through the end of the month, provide references for future employment. But I can't—" Her voice cracked despite her best efforts to control it. "I can't have you here. I can't look at you and not see my son crying in pain because I made the wrong choice." The devastation on Daniel's face was complete. "Don't do this, Vivian. Please. Let me help him through recovery. Let me fix this." "You can't fix this. That's the problem. You're not actually a licensed therapist no matter how much experience you have. You're not bound by the ethical guidelines that would have prevented this. You're just a man who made me believe—" She stopped, biting back words that would cut even deeper. "You need to go, now." For a long moment, Daniel just stood there, and Vivian watched his heart break in real time. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked toward the elevator without another word. She watched him go, watched the doors close on his devastated expression, and then she went into her office, closed the door, and finally let herself fall apart. She'd trusted him. Against every instinct that had built her empire, against medical advice, against the voice of reason that said credentials mattered. She'd trusted Daniel Mercer with her son's future, and he'd failed. The next 3 days were the longest of Vivian's life. Theo cried constantly, asking for Daniel, not understanding why his favorite person had disappeared. Mrs. Chen tried to explain that sometimes therapists needed to take breaks, but Theo saw through the comfortable lie. He knew something was wrong. He knew his accident had cost him more than just 3 weeks of progress. On the 4th day, Dr. Patel came to remove Theo's stitches and assess the healing. She worked in silence while Theo stared at the ceiling, his whole body radiating misery. "Knees healing well," Dr. Patel said finally. "No infection, good tissue response. We can start very gentle range of motion work in a few days." "Will I be able to walk again?" Theo asked. "Or did I wreck everything?" "You didn't wreck anything, sweetheart. You had an accident. Accidents heal." "But I was getting so much better. I was almost ready to try without the walker, and now—" Theo's voice broke. "Now I'm back in this stupid chair and Daniel's gone and everything's terrible." Dr. Patel glanced at Vivian, her expression complicated. "Can I speak with you privately, Ms. Cross?" They stepped into the hallway, and Dr. Patel crossed her arms, her professional mask firmly in place. "You fired Daniel." "I asked him to leave, yes." "That was a mistake." Vivian felt her defenses rise. "He was working over medical recommendation and Theo got hurt. How is letting him go a mistake?" "Because the accident wasn't his fault. I reviewed the documentation he sent me. Yes, he sent me daily reports even after you dismissed him. The cramping was caused by an electrolyte imbalance that wouldn't have shown up in any assessment we were doing. Theo had a stomach bug 2 days before the accident, barely mentioned it because it was mild. That bug depleted his potassium levels. Combined with the intensive muscle work, It created conditions for sudden cramping. Daniel couldn't have predicted it. Vivian felt the floor tilt beneath her. What? I had blood work done while Theo was in the ER. I didn't mention it because I wanted to rule out some possibilities first. But the results are clear. Theo's potassium was critically low. That's what caused the cramp, not overwork. Dr. Patel's voice softened slightly. Daniel was right to continue therapy. The inflammation was already improving with his modifications. And the accident was genuinely unforeseeable. It was just bad luck, Vivian. The words hit like physical blows. Then why didn't you tell me this 4 days ago? Because you fired Daniel before I had a chance to review all the data, and then I spent 3 days trying to figure out if I should tell you or let you believe you'd made the right call for your peace of mind. Dr. Patel sighed. But watching Theo regress, seeing how he shut down without Daniel here, I can't let that continue. You made a decision based on incomplete information, and now you need to fix it. Vivian couldn't find words. I told him to leave. I blamed him for, then tell him you were wrong and ask him to come back. Dr. Patel packed her equipment. Before you lose the best thing that's happened to Theo's recovery. And possibly the best thing that's happened to you, though I suspect that's not something you're ready to admit yet. After Dr. Patel left, Vivian stood alone in the hallway, her carefully controlled world dissolving around her. She'd built an empire by making quick decisions based on available data and never second-guessing herself. Decisiveness was her superpower. Certainty was her armor. But she'd been wrong. Catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. And her certainty had cost Theo, the one person who'd actually been able to help. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called the number Daniel had given her months ago. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail, his voice calm and professional on the recording. Daniel, it's Vivian. I need to talk to you. Please call me back. He didn't. She called again that evening. Voicemail. The next morning. Voicemail. By the 3rd day, Vivian realized he wasn't going to answer. She'd sent him away, blamed him publicly, destroyed the fragile professional relationship they'd built. Why would he give her the chance to do more damage? She stood in her empty office, looking at Lila's butterfly drawing still hanging on her wall, and finally understood what she'd actually lost. It wasn't just a therapist. It was someone who'd believed in her son when everyone else offered only sympathy and limited expectations. Someone who'd seen potential where others saw permanent disability. Someone who'd given freely of himself with no expectation of recognition or reward. Someone who'd somehow, impossibly, started to feel like family, and she'd thrown it all away in a moment of fear-driven panic. Vivian Cross had climbed to the top of the business world by never admitting weakness, never showing vulnerability, never apologizing. But standing in her office, holding a drawing made by a little girl who'd called her a friend, Vivian finally understood that some things mattered more than pride. She just had no idea how to fix what she'd broken. The apartment building looked even more worn in the harsh light of a July morning, the heat already making the air shimmer above cracked pavement. Vivian had driven across the city at 7 a.m., knowing it was too early for a social call, but unable to wait another moment. She'd spent 5 days calling Daniel's phone, leaving messages that went from professionally apologetic to desperately pleading, all met with silence. She climbed the familiar stairs, her designer heels clicking on linoleum that probably hadn't been replaced in 30 years, and knocked on 4B with more force than she'd intended. No answer. She knocked again. Daniel, I know you're home. Your car is in the lot. Please, I need to talk to you. Still nothing, but she could hear movement inside, the soft shuffle of footsteps, someone deliberately choosing not to answer. I was wrong, Vivian said to the closed door, her voice cracking with exhaustion and desperation. Dr. Patel explained about the electrolyte imbalance. The accident wasn't your fault. I blamed you for something you couldn't have prevented, and I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. The door remained closed, but the footsteps had stopped. Someone was listening. Theo asks for you every day. He's regressing without you, not just physically. He's shut down emotionally. He won't do his exercises with the replacement therapist Dr. Patel sent. He barely speaks. He just sits in his chair staring at nothing, and I don't know how to reach him. Vivian pressed her palm against the door. I don't know how to fix what I broke. Please, Daniel, please help me fix this. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the locks clicked and the door opened to reveal Daniel Mercer, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face haggard, his whole bearing carrying the weight of a man who'd been gutted and left to bleed. "You can't fix it," he said quietly. "Some things, once broken, stay broken." "I don't believe that. You taught Theo that different doesn't mean broken, that bodies can heal, that hope matters." "Were you lying?" "I wasn't lying about Theo's body, but trust." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "Trust doesn't heal, Vivian. Once someone shows you who they really are in a crisis, you believe them. Then believe this. I made a terrible mistake out of fear. I was terrified watching my son in pain, and I lashed out at the person I'd trusted most because that felt safer than admitting I was helpless. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. And I will spend however long it takes making it up to you if you'll just give me the chance. This isn't about me. It's about Theo." Daniel leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "You really want to know why I won't come back? Because the next time something goes wrong, and something will eventually go wrong because that's how therapy works, you'll panic again. You'll blame me again. And I can't keep putting myself in that position. I have a daughter who needs stability. I can't risk my livelihood on someone who'll throw me away the moment things get scary." The words hit Vivian like physical blows because they were completely, devastatingly true. "You're right. Everything you just said is right. I've spent my entire career controlling variables and minimizing risk, and the moment I couldn't control what happened to Theo, I reverted to form. I looked for someone to blame because blame felt like control. So what's different now? What's changed that makes you think you won't do the exact same thing next time?" "Because I spent 5 days watching my son give up hope, and I finally understood that you weren't just his therapist. You were the person who made him believe his future could be different than the limitations everyone else was setting for him. And I threw that away because I was too proud and too scared to admit I needed you." Vivian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I'm here because I'm done pretending I can do this alone. I'm done believing money and power can fix everything. I'm asking you, not as an employer, but as a mother who's desperate and terrified and completely out of her depth, please help my son. Not because I'm paying you, not because it's your job, but because you're the only person who actually believes he can walk again." Daniel's expression flickered with something that might have been pain or might have been the last dying ember of hope. "And when the next crisis comes, when the next accident happens, or the next setback crushes him, what then? Then we face it together. We make decisions as a team. We trust each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Vivian took a shaky breath. "I can't promise I won't be scared, but I can promise I won't shut you out again. I won't make decisions in panic and call it protection." Behind Daniel, a small figure appeared in the hallway. Lila, still in her pajamas, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. She looked at Vivian with those serious, assessing eyes, then tugged on her father's shirt. "Daddy's sad," she said quietly. "Vivian can fix?" Daniel looked down at his daughter, something breaking across his face. "It's not that simple, sweetheart. Butterfly Lady was nice to me. She understands about patterns." Lila moved closer to Vivian, studying her with that intense focus. "Theo is sad too?" "Very sad," Vivian admitted. "He misses your daddy very much." "Daddy helps people who are sad. That's his job, not cleaning, helping." Lila turned back to Daniel. "Sarah Mama would say, 'Help Theo. You promised Sarah Mama.'" The name hung in the air between them. Daniel's wife, the promise he'd made her, the entire foundation of why he did any of this. Vivian watched Daniel struggle with the weight of it, saw the moment his resolve began to crack. "Lila, go get dressed," he said finally. "Vivian and I need to talk. Alone." Lila studied them both for another moment, then nodded and disappeared back into the apartment. Daniel stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him, creating a privacy that felt both intimate and isolating. "I can't go back to how it was," he said. "The power dynamic, the employer-employee structure, where you hold all the cards, and I'm just supposed to trust you won't use them against me. It doesn't work. It's not sustainable." "Then we change it. Tell me what you need." "I need autonomy, real autonomy, not just on paper. Treatment decisions are mine to make in consultation with Dr. Patel. You can observe, you can ask questions, but you don't override us because you're scared. Daniel crossed his arms, his posture defensive. I need a contract that protects me from arbitrary dismissal. If you want to fire me, there's a process: medical review, peer consultation, documented cause. You can't just throw me out in a moment of panic. Done. What else? I need you to actually be present, not just physically in the room, but emotionally available. Theo's recovery isn't something you can delegate or schedule around board meetings. He needs his mother, not a CEO who shows up for the highlight reel. The accusation stung because it was accurate. I've been trying to be more present. Since you started officially, I've rearranged my schedule, and you'll keep rearranging it until the next crisis at work demands your attention. I've seen how you operate, Vivian. Your company is your first priority. Always has been, always will be. And I get it. You built something remarkable. You've got thousands of employees depending on you. But Theo needs to be first sometimes, not just when it's convenient. He will be. I promise he will be. You promise a lot of things. Following through is the hard part. Daniel rubbed his face, exhaustion making his voice rough. I want to believe you. I want to help Theo. But I've been burned before. Not by you, by the system, by people who promised opportunities and delivered disappointment. I'm tired, Vivian. I'm tired of fighting for legitimacy in a profession that sees me as less than because I don't have the right letters after my name. I'm tired of proving myself over and over only to have it all disappear the moment something goes wrong. Then stop fighting alone. Let me fight with you. Vivian moved closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in Daniel's brown eyes, the scar on his chin from some long-ago accident, the way his jaw clenched when he was trying not to show emotion. I have resources, connections, power that I've been using to build my empire. What if I use some of that to build something different? What if we created a space where credentials matter less than competence, where people like you could work without constantly justifying your existence? What are you talking about? The community center, Harbor Heights. You said they're losing their building? Vivian pulled out her phone, opening files her acquisitions team had prepared at her request. I've had my people looking at properties in that neighborhood. There's a warehouse 2 blocks from the current location, 30,000 square feet, structurally sound, currently owned by a company that owes my bank significant money. I can acquire it for below market value, convert it into a state-of-the-art therapeutic center, adaptive equipment, sensory-friendly spaces, accessible everything. A place where kids like Theo and adults who can't afford private care can get the help they need. Daniel stared at her like she'd started speaking a foreign language. That would cost millions. I have millions, and unlike most of my investments, this one would actually matter. Vivian met his gaze steadily. I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness. I'm trying to show you that I understand now. What you've been doing, helping people who fall through the cracks, working without recognition or adequate resources, that matters more than any merger I've ever closed. And I want to help you do it properly, with support, with legitimacy, with the kind of backing that turns a volunteer operation into something sustainable. Why? Why would you do this? Because you changed my life. You changed my son's life. You showed me what actually matters, and now I can't unsee it. Vivian's voice dropped. And because I'm trying to be the person you believed I could be when you agreed to help Theo, someone who uses their power for something more than profit margins. Daniel was quiet for a long time, his expression cycling through disbelief, hope, caution, and something that looked dangerously like trust beginning to reform from the ashes of what she'd destroyed. If I come back, he said finally, and that's still a big if, things are different. We're partners in Theo's care, not boss and employee. Equal voices in treatment decisions. And Theo comes first, before board meetings and acquisitions and whatever crisis is supposedly urgent at your company. Partners, Vivian agreed. Equal voices. Theo first. And if I see you falling back into old patterns, prioritizing work over presence, trying to control things you can't control, I call you on it, no matter how uncomfortable it makes you. I wouldn't want it any other way. Daniel searched her face for a long moment, looking for the lie, the crack in her resolve that would prove this was temporary. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he finally, slowly, nodded. Okay, I'll come back. But we start slow. A few sessions a week, building back trust, seeing how Theo responds. And the first sign this isn't working, the first moment the dynamic turns toxic, I'm gone. No guilt, no drama, just done. That's fair. Vivian felt tears threaten and didn't bother hiding them. Thank you. Thank you for giving me another chance. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Theo, and maybe a little bit for Lila, who apparently thinks you're worth forgiving. He managed a tired smile. She doesn't trust easily. You must have made quite an impression. She's extraordinary, like her father. The compliment hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was quite ready to examine. Daniel cleared his throat and looked away. I need to get Lila ready for her day program, and I need sleep. When do you want me to start? Whenever you're ready, today, tomorrow, next week, you set the timeline. Tomorrow, 1 p.m. And Vivian? He caught her wrist gently as she turned to leave. Thank you. For coming here. For admitting you were wrong. That couldn't have been easy for someone like you. Someone like me? Someone used to being right about everything. His smile was wry but not unkind. I know what it costs to admit vulnerability, more than most people. Vivian covered his hand with hers, the touch brief but genuine. Then we're both learning to be vulnerable together. That's something. She left him standing in the hallway, returned to her car, and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes just breathing. She'd done it. She'd apologized, admitted fault, negotiated as an equal instead of dictating terms. Everything her business instincts told her was weakness. Every impulse she'd spent decades suppressing, she'd let herself feel and express. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked. The drive home took her through neighborhoods she usually never saw, places where people lived in the gaps between her high-rise world. Community gardens and vacant lots, small businesses with hand-painted signs, children playing in parks with equipment that had seen better decades. The cities she'd helped build with her investments and developments, but somehow never really seen. At a red light, she made a call. Jonathan, it's Vivian. I need you to pull together the acquisitions team. That warehouse property in Harbor Heights we discussed, move it to priority 1. I want it secured by end of business today. Today? Vivian, that's not much time for due diligence. Then work fast and pull budget projections for converting it into a therapeutic community center. Full accessibility, state-of-the-art equipment, space for expansion. I want plans on my desk by Monday. She could practically hear her COO's confusion through the phone. A community center? Is this some kind of PR initiative? No, this is personal. Just get it done. Back at the penthouse, she found Theo exactly where she'd left him, in his wheelchair by the window, staring out at nothing. Mrs. Chen sat nearby, her face drawn with worry. Any change? Vivian asked quietly. He ate some breakfast, but still won't talk, won't engage. Mrs. Chen shook her head. I've never seen him like this. It's like he's given up. Vivian moved to kneel beside Theo's chair, taking his small hands in hers. Sweetheart, I have something to tell you. Daniel's coming back. For a moment, nothing. Then Theo's head turned slowly, his eyes focusing on her face with desperate hope. Really? He's really coming back? Tomorrow, 1 o'clock. He's going to help you get better again. But I thought, you said he had to leave. You said... Theo's voice broke. I thought it was my fault because I fell, because I'm broken. Oh, baby, no, 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 no. Vivian pulled him into her arms, holding him as tightly as she dared. You are not broken. You never were broken. And Daniel leaving had nothing to do with you. That was my fault. I made a mistake, and I sent away someone who was helping you because I was scared. But I fixed it. I apologized and I asked him to come back, and he said yes, because he cares about you and he wants to help you walk. Theo clung to her, his small body shaking with sobs of relief. I miss him so much, Mom. I miss him teaching me exercises and telling me about when his legs hurt too, when he was learning to skateboard and making me feel like I can do hard things. I know you do. Vivian stroked his hair, rocking him gently. And tomorrow he'll be here, and you can tell him all about how you've been feeling. He'll understand. Daniel always understands. They stayed like that for a long time, mother and son finding comfort in each other's presence in a way they hadn't managed in months. Eventually, Theo's sobs quieted to sniffles, then to steady breathing. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart." "Do you like Daniel?" The question caught Vivian off guard. "Of course I like him. He's an excellent therapist." "No, I mean really like him. The way grown-ups like each other when they want to be together all the time." Vivian pulled back to look at Theo's face, saw the serious expression that was far too knowing for 6 years old. "What makes you ask that?" "Because you smile different when he's here, and you came home early more when he was working with me. And Mrs. Chen says you've never apologized to anyone like that before, so it must mean he's really special." Theo tilted his head. "Lila's nice. I like her drawings. If you and Daniel got married, she could be my sister." "Theo, we're not." Vivian floundered, completely unprepared for this conversation. "Daniel and I are colleagues. We work together to help you get better. That's all. But you could be more. If you wanted. Daniel's sad a lot since Sarah Mama died. You're sad a lot since my accident. Maybe you could be not sad together." The simple, childlike logic of it would have been amusing if it hadn't struck so close to something Vivian had been trying very hard not to examine. She'd told herself her growing feelings for Daniel were respect for his skill, admiration for his dedication, gratitude for what he'd given Theo. She'd carefully avoided labeling the way her heart lifted when he arrived for sessions, or the way his rare smiles made her feel like she'd won some precious victory. "It's more complicated than that, sweetheart." "Why?" "Because he used to clean floors." Theo's expression was far too perceptive. "That's not his real job. His real job is helping people. You help people too, with your company. You're not that different. We're very different. I live in a world of boardrooms and business deals. Daniel lives in a world of community centers and kids who need help. Those worlds don't overlap much." "But they do here, with me." Theo's hand found hers. "And anyway, maybe different is good. You always say I'm getting better because we're trying different things than the regular doctors. Maybe you and Daniel would be good because you're different from each other." Vivian hugged him again, marveling at the wisdom somehow contained in her 6-year-old son. "When did you get so smart?" "Daniel says I'm smart because I don't give up even when things are really hard. He says that's the most important kind of smart. He's right about that." The next afternoon, Vivian found herself pacing her office at 12:45, checking her appearance in the reflection of her window more times than was reasonable. She'd changed clothes twice that morning, finally settling on casual pants and a simple blouse. Professional, but not corporate. The kind of outfit that said partner, not boss. At 12:58, the elevator chimed. Vivian forced herself to stay in her office, to give Daniel space to reconnect with Theo without her hovering. But she couldn't help listening to the voices from Theo's room, her son's excited chatter, Daniel's warm responses, the sound of laughter that had been missing for days. After 20 minutes, she couldn't stand it anymore. She walked to Theo's room and stood in the doorway, watching Daniel guide Theo through gentle range of motion exercises for his healing knee. "How's he doing?" she asked. Daniel looked up, and something in his expression had softened since yesterday morning. "Really well. The knee's healing beautifully. Another week and we can start rebuilding the strength we lost. We'll be back on track before you know it, buddy." "Can I still learn to walk without the walker?" Theo asked anxiously. "Absolutely. This is just a detour. We'll get there." Daniel completed the rotation sequence and helped Theo shift position. "Actually, this gives us a chance to work on upper body strength, which you'll need for balance anyway. So it's not wasted time, just different focus." Vivian watched them work together, the easy rapport that had developed over months of trust and effort, and felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This partnership, this collaboration, this willingness to show up and do the hard work. This was what Theo needed. What she needed. "Vivian, do you have a few minutes?" Daniel asked after finishing the session. "There are some things we should discuss about the treatment plan going forward." They left Theo with Mrs. Chen and moved to Vivian's office. Daniel settled into one of the chairs across from her desk, and Vivian deliberately chose the chair beside him rather than sitting behind the desk. Equal partners, not employer and employee. "I've been thinking about what you said," Daniel began. About the community center. If you're serious about that, completely serious, I have a team working on property acquisition right now. Then I want to be involved in the planning, not just as a consultant, as a partner. This is my field, my community. I know what these kids need better than any architect or designer you could hire. Agreed. In fact, I was hoping you'd say that. I want you to lead the therapeutic program design. Hire the staff, source the equipment, develop the protocols. Vivian pulled out a folder she'd prepared. I've had my legal team draft a proposal. You'd be director of therapeutic services, full salary and benefits, equity stake in the organization. It would be structured as a nonprofit, but you'd have real authority and real resources. Daniel stared at the documents like they might be a mirage. You're offering me a real position, with actual credentials that matter. I'm offering you the chance to build something that reflects what you've been doing in the shadows for years. A legitimate, sustainable program that gives kids the care they deserve. Vivian met his eyes. You deserve legitimacy too, Daniel. You've earned it 10 times over. Why are you doing this? And please don't say it's just for Theo. It started with Theo, but it's become bigger than that. Vivian chose her words carefully. I've spent my entire adult life building an empire that generates profit, but not necessarily purpose. And then you showed up in my home, helping my son, volunteering at community centers, keeping promises to someone who's gone, and I realized I've been measuring success by the wrong metrics. You changed what I value. So yes, I'm doing this because of Theo, but I'm also doing it because you made me want to be better, to build something that actually matters. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the edges of the proposal documents. If we do this, if we really build this thing, I need one promise from you. Name it. This isn't about me. It's not a monument to my late wife or a redemption story for the janitor who made good. This is about kids who need help and deserve to receive it without stigma or financial barriers. The moment it becomes about anything else, we've lost the point. Agreed. This is about the kids, always about the kids. Then I'm in. Let's build something that matters. They shook on it, and Vivian felt the shift in their relationship, from adversarial to collaborative, from employer-employee to genuine partners working toward a shared goal. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Over the next 3 weeks, a pattern emerged. Daniel came 3 times a week for Theo's sessions, gradually rebuilding the strength they'd lost during the injury recovery. The stitches came out, the bruising faded, and slowly but surely, Theo's confidence returned. Dr. Patel monitored everything with careful attention, but even she had to admit the recovery was progressing beautifully. In between therapy sessions, Vivian and Daniel met to plan the community center. They toured the warehouse property together, Daniel's eyes lighting up as he described what each space could become. They interviewed potential staff members, Daniel pushing for people who combined credentials with genuine care. They argued over equipment choices and program structures, learning to trust each other's expertise, finding compromise when their visions diverged. And somewhere in all that collaboration, something shifted between them. The professional boundaries they'd carefully maintained began to blur around the edges. Vivian found herself looking forward to their planning sessions as much for Daniel's company as for the work itself. She noticed the way his face transformed when he was excited about an idea, the careful way he listened when she explained budgets and funding structures, the laugh he tried to hide when she made jokes that probably weren't actually funny. Daniel seemed to notice too. His smiles came easier around her. He started arriving a few minutes early for their meetings, using the time for casual conversation about Lila's latest art project or Theo's newest joke. He brought coffee one morning, her order memorized, prepared exactly how she liked it, and the small thoughtfulness of the gesture made her absurdly happy. But neither of them acknowledged what was growing between them. They kept things professional, appropriate, carefully platonic, because Daniel was still Theo's therapist, and Vivian was still technically his employer, and crossing that line would complicate everything they'd worked so hard to build. Then one evening in late July, Vivian came home to find Daniel still in the living room at 7 p.m., long after Theo's session had ended. He was sitting on the floor surrounded by papers, his expression frustrated. "Everything okay?" Vivian asked. He looked up, startled. Sorry, I lost track of time. I was trying to finalize the staff schedule for the center's opening, but the math isn't working. We need 12 full-time therapists to cover all the program hours, but the budget only supports 9 positions unless we cut equipment spending, which defeats the purpose of having a well-equipped facility. Let me see. Vivian settled beside him on the floor, reviewing his calculations. They worked through the numbers together, finding efficiencies and adjustments, and somewhere around 8 o'clock, Vivian realized they'd been sitting shoulder to shoulder for an hour, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd been this content. There, she said finally, pointing to the revised budget. If we structure the compensation packages this way and phase in the equipment purchases over 2 quarters instead of immediately, we can support 12 positions and still have contingency funding. That's brilliant. How did I miss that? Because you're thinking like a therapist, not a finance person. That's why we make a good team. The words came out more warmly than she'd intended, and Vivian felt heat rise in her cheeks. Daniel was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Vivian, can I ask you something? Of course. That day you came to my apartment to ask me to come back. Why did you really come? Not the reasons you gave me then, but the real reason. Vivian's heart started hammering. I told you the real reason. Theo needed you. Theo needed me 3 days earlier. You waited 5 days, calling and leaving messages. You could have sent Dr. Patel or Mrs. Chen to make the case, but instead you came yourself at 7 in the morning and stood in my hallway admitting you were wrong. Daniel shifted to face her more directly. That took courage, the kind of courage that comes from something more than professional responsibility. I don't know what you're asking me. I'm asking if I'm imagining this thing between us, this connection that feels like more than just working together. His voice was quiet but steady. Because I'd really like to not be imagining it, but I also can't afford to misread the situation. I have Lila to think about, and my own heart that's barely finished healing from losing Sarah. So I need to know, am I seeing something that isn't there? Vivian's breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to deflect, to maintain professional boundaries, to protect herself from vulnerability. But she'd learned something in the past months working with Daniel, watching him with Theo, seeing the way he gave of himself without reservation. Some things were worth the risk. You're not imagining it, she said softly. I've been trying very hard to ignore it, to tell myself it's just respect or gratitude or partnership. But it's more than that. Has been for a while now. I just didn't know how to acknowledge it without making everything complicated. It is complicated. I work for you. I'm Theo's therapist. There are power dynamics and ethical considerations and a dozen reasons this is a terrible idea. I know, believe me, I've cataloged every reason this shouldn't happen. Vivian managed a shaky laugh. But somehow none of those reasons seem to matter when you're sitting here helping me solve budget problems at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm, calloused from years of physical work, steady in a way that made her feel anchored. I'm not good at this, he admitted. I was with Sarah since college. I don't know how to date or court or whatever people do now, and I have a daughter who needs stability and routines. And I'm still figuring out who I am as a single parent and a professional and a person who's trying to move forward while honoring the past. I'm not good at this either. I've spent 20 years prioritizing my company over relationships. I don't know how to be vulnerable or let someone matter this much. And I have a son who needs both of us to be focused on his recovery, not distracted by whatever this is between us. They sat there on her living room floor, holding hands, cataloging all the reasons their connection was impossible. And then Daniel smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face, and said, "Want to figure it out together anyway?" Vivian felt something break open in her chest, some careful defense she'd maintained for decades finally crumbling. Yes, I really, really do. He squeezed her hand and they sat in comfortable silence for a while, not rushing to define or label, just existing together in the acknowledgement that something real was growing between them. We should probably take this slow, Daniel said eventually. For Theo and Lila. They've both been through so much upheaval. They need stability more than they need us figuring out romance. Agreed. Slow, careful, putting them first. But maybe we could have dinner sometime? Just the two of us. Not a meeting about the center or Theo's care, just dinner. I'd like that very much. They made plans for Saturday evening, nothing fancy, just a quiet restaurant in a neighborhood neither of them frequented, where they could talk without running into Vivian's business associates or Daniel's community contacts. Neutral ground for tentative beginnings. Over the next few days, Vivian found herself both terrified and exhilarated. She'd negotiated billion-dollar deals with less anxiety than she felt preparing for one dinner with Daniel Mercer. She changed outfits 4 times, finally settling on jeans and a simple sweater, casual enough to not seem like she was trying too hard, nice enough to show she'd made an effort. Daniel picked her up at 7, and the shy smile on his face suggested he was just as nervous. They drove to the restaurant making careful small talk about safe topics. Theo's latest achievement walking the length of the hallway unassisted, Lila's excitement about the new art supplies Vivian had sent over, the progress on the community center construction. But once they were seated across from each other with menus neither of them was really reading, the conversation shifted into something more honest. "I'm scared," Daniel admitted, "of messing this up, of letting you down, of getting attached and having it fall apart." "Me too, of all of that." Vivian set down her menu. "But I'm more scared of not trying, of letting fear keep me from something that could be extraordinary." They talked for 3 hours, barely noticing when their food arrived and then cooled, too absorbed in learning each other beyond their professional roles. Daniel told her about growing up in a working-class neighborhood not unlike the one where Harbor Heights stood, about meeting Sarah in college and knowing immediately she was his person, about the years of building a life together only to have it stolen by cancer that moved too fast for any of them to prepare. Vivian told him about her own childhood, wealthy but emotionally barren, parents who measured success and achievement and saw affection as weakness. About building cross-industries as much to prove something to her father as to create financial security. About the loneliness of succeeding beyond her wildest dreams but having no one to share it with who understood the cost. "Theo's father?" Daniel asked carefully. "What? I've never heard you mention him." "He left when I was 6 months pregnant, said he didn't sign up for fatherhood and didn't want the responsibility." Vivian's voice was matter-of-fact, years of therapy having dulled the ache. "Last I heard he was in Europe somewhere, living off a trust fund and avoiding anything that requires commitment." "His loss. Theo's incredible. He is, despite my many failures as a parent." "You're not a failure. You're learning. There's a difference." Daniel reached across the table, his hand finding hers. "I spent years thinking I was failing Lila because I couldn't make the world easier for her, couldn't fix her challenges with love and good intentions. Sarah finally made me understand that showing up consistently, advocating fiercely, and loving unconditionally was enough. The rest would work itself out." And has it worked itself out? Some days. Other days are hard. But Lila's growing into herself, finding her way. That's all I can hope for. They left the restaurant at 10, neither wanting the evening to end. Daniel drove back toward her penthouse, but parked a block away, and they walked slowly through streets that were just beginning to quiet for the night. "This was nice," Daniel said as they reached her building. "Really nice. Can we do it again?" "Absolutely. Though fair warning, I'm terrible at this. I'm going to overthink everything and probably say the wrong thing at the wrong time and generally be a disaster." "Good thing I'm patient then." He smiled, then grew more serious. "Vivian, I need you to know this isn't a rebound for me. I loved Sarah with everything I had, and part of me will always love her. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and I'm trying to build a life that honors what we had while making space for what could be. I understand, and I'm not asking you to forget her or stop loving her memory. That love made you who you are. I wouldn't want you to be anyone else." He kissed her then, soft and tentative and sweet, a question more than a statement. Vivian answered by leaning in, letting herself trust this moment, this man, this terrifying leap into vulnerability. When they pulled apart, Daniel was smiling. "Definitely want to do this again." "Me too." She floated into her penthouse feeling like a teenager after a first date, ridiculous and giddy and more alive than she'd felt in years. Mrs. Chen was waiting up, ostensibly reading a book, but clearly positioned to hear all about the evening. "Good date?" the older woman asked with barely concealed amusement. "Wonderful date. Mind your own business." Mrs. Chen laughed. "About time you found someone who makes you smile like that. Daniel's a good man." "He is, which terrifies me." "Good things should terrify you a little. Means they matter." Vivian went to check on Theo, finding him asleep with a smile on his face, his walker positioned beside the bed, a symbol of progress, of hope, of the future they were building one step at a time. She stood in his doorway for a long moment, thinking about all the ways her life had changed since the night she'd caught Daniel helping her son. How one decision to trust instead of control had cascaded into transformation. How the janitor she'd overlooked had become the partner she'd needed. How admitting weakness had somehow made her stronger. Her phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "Thank you for tonight. For taking a chance on me. Sweet dreams." Vivian typed back, "Thank you for being worth the chance. Sleep well." She went to bed and actually slept through the night for the first time in months. No anxiety dreams about board meetings or hostile takeovers, just peaceful darkness and the warmth of possibility. The morning of August 15th dawned clear and warm, the kind of perfect late summer day that felt designed for miracles. Vivian woke early, nerves and excitement tangling in her chest, because today was the day they'd been building toward for months. Today, Theo would attempt to walk completely unassisted, no parallel bars, no walker, no hand supporting him. Just his own strength, his own balance, his own belief that his body could do what everyone had once said was impossible. She found Daniel already in the living room at 6 a.m., setting up equipment and reviewing his notes with the kind of focused intensity that meant he was just as nervous as she was. He looked up when she entered, and the smile that crossed his face made her heart do complicated things. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "Too excited, too terrified. Pick one." Vivian moved to his side, looking at the progression charts he'd been updating. "Is he ready for this?" "His strength is there. His balance has improved dramatically. His confidence is probably the strongest I've seen in any patient." Daniel set down his pen and turned to face her. "But you're really asking if I'm sure, if I can guarantee this will work. And I can't. I can tell you he's prepared as anyone could be. The rest is up to his body and his determination. And if he can't do it, if he tries and falls, then we catch him, we adjust the plan, and we try again another day. But Vivian..." Daniel took her hands, his touch steady and grounding. "I really think he's going to do this. I've been doing this work for 18 years, and I know what breakthrough looks like. Theo's right there." Dr. Patel arrived at 9, wanting to observe and document what she openly called the most remarkable recovery I've seen in my career. Mrs. Chen hovered anxiously, alternating between excitement and worry. And at 10 o'clock, when Theo woke and learned what day it was, his face lit up with a mixture of joy and determination that made everyone in the room believe in miracles. "Today's the day?" he asked, his voice small but steady. "Today's the day," Daniel confirmed. "If you're ready, no pressure, no rush. We can wait if you want more time." "I'm ready. I've been ready forever." Theo looked at his mother. "Will you watch, Mom? I wouldn't miss this for anything in the world." They gathered in the living room, the space they'd converted into a therapeutic gym months ago. The parallel bars stood ready if Theo needed them, the walker positioned nearby just in case. But in the center of the room, they'd cleared an open path, 15 feet of empty floor that represented a journey far longer than its physical distance. Daniel helped Theo transfer from his wheelchair to a standing position at the edge of the path. Theo's legs trembled slightly. They always did initially, but held firm as Daniel stabilized him and then slowly, carefully, let go. "Okay, buddy," Daniel said quietly, moving to stand at the far end of the path. "Remember everything we've practiced. Core tight, weight through your heels, eyes forward on your target. Don't think about your legs. Let them do what they've learned to do. Just focus on coming to me." "What if I fall?" "Then I catch you. I'm right here. I will always catch you." Daniel's voice carried absolute conviction. "But Theo, you're not going to fall. You're going to walk across this room and give me the biggest high five of your life." Vivian positioned herself to the side, close enough to help if needed, but out of Theo's direct line of sight. Her hands were clenched so tightly, her nails cut into her palms. Dr. Patel had her tablet ready to record, and Mrs. Chen was openly crying already, not even trying to hide the tears. Theo took a deep breath, then another. He looked at Daniel across those 15 feet, and something shifted in his expression, the fear falling away, replaced by pure determination. And then he stepped forward. His first step was tentative, his leg shaking with effort, but it held. The second step came more confidently. The third, fourth, fifth, each one stronger than the last. His arms spread slightly for balance, his face a mask of concentration, his whole body engaged in the monumental task of doing what it hadn't been able to do for 18 months. Halfway across the room, his left leg wobbled. Vivian's breath caught, and she almost lunged forward. But Daniel held up one hand, a subtle signal to wait, and Theo corrected his balance without assistance. He kept going, 10 feet, 11, 12. "You're doing it," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "Keep coming, almost here." 13 feet, 14. Theo reached Daniel and collapsed forward into his arms, his legs finally giving out from the effort. But he'd done it. He'd walked completely unassisted for 15 feet, and everyone in the room was crying, including Daniel, who caught Theo and held him like he was the most precious thing in the world. "I did it," Theo whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "Daniel, I did it. I walked." "You did it. I knew you could. I always knew." Daniel pulled back to look at Theo's face, his own eyes shining. "I am so incredibly proud of you." Vivian rushed forward, wrapping both of them in her arms, unable to articulate the overwhelming cascade of emotions flooding through her. Relief, joy, pride, gratitude, love, all of it tangled together in a moment of pure, perfect triumph. "My brave boy," she managed to say. "My incredible, strong, amazing boy." Dr. Patel was documenting everything, her professional mask cracked by a smile that suggested she was just as moved as everyone else. 15 feet, completely unassisted, excellent form and balance correction. "This is remarkable, Theo. Truly remarkable." Mrs. Chen brought Theo's wheelchair over and they helped him settle into it, his legs exhausted from the effort, but his spirit absolutely soaring. He couldn't stop smiling, couldn't stop talking about how it felt, how his legs remembered, how he knew he could do more. "Can I do it again?" he asked eagerly. "I want to try for 20 feet. "Tomorrow," Daniel said firmly but kindly. "You just did something your body hasn't done in a year and a half. We need to let your muscles recover, make sure we don't push so hard you get injured. But yes, tomorrow we can work on distance, and next week we can start working on endurance. And by the end of the month, if everything goes well, we can try walking outside." "In the real park?" "In the real park, with other kids and grass and everything." Theo's joy was incandescent. He insisted on calling Lila to tell her the news, his excited chatter filling the room as he described his walk in elaborate detail. And through it all, Vivian stood beside Daniel, their hands finding each other naturally, a touch that spoke of partnership and something deeper that they were still learning to name. After Theo's rest period, when Mrs. Chen had taken him for lunch and Dr. Patel had left to file her reports, Vivian and Daniel found themselves alone in the living room. The space felt different now, not just a therapeutic gym, but a place where something miraculous had happened, where hope had manifested into physical reality. "Thank you," Vivian said quietly, "for believing in him when no one else did, for pushing when I wanted to pull back, for seeing potential where everyone else saw limitation. Thank you for trusting me, for taking a chance on someone who didn't have the right credentials but had the right heart." Daniel turned to face her fully. "And for building something bigger than just Theo's recovery. The community center opens next month, and it's going to change lives, Vivian. Kids who would have been written off will get the care they deserve. That's your legacy as much as any company you've built." Our legacy. This was a partnership. Speaking of partnership, Daniel seemed to gather his courage. "Lila wants to know when she can have a play date with Theo. and I've been trying to figure out how to explain to an 8-year-old autistic girl what exactly our relationship is. But I realized I don't actually know myself. We've been dating for 6 weeks, and we haven't really defined what this is. Vivian felt her pulse quicken. What do you want it to be? I want... Daniel stopped, choosing his words carefully. I want you in my life. Really in it, not just as Theo's mom or my business partner. I want dinners together where we talk about everything and nothing. I want Lila and Theo to grow up together, to be the siblings neither of them has. I want to wake up looking forward to seeing you and go to bed grateful you exist. He paused. I want something real and lasting, if you're willing to build it with me. I'm willing, more than willing. Vivian moved closer, her hands finding his. But I need you to know, I'm still learning how to do this, how to be vulnerable, how to put relationship ahead of work, how to be present instead of always planning 3 steps ahead. I'm going to mess up, probably frequently, and I'm still figuring out how to move forward while honoring the past, how to build something new without feeling like I'm betraying Sarah's memory, how to be a good father while also being a good partner. Daniel smiled slightly. So we'll mess up together and figure it out as we go. That's what people do, right? I have no idea. I've never actually done this before. The real thing, not just dating for appearances or convenience. Vivian laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. We're probably going to be terrible at it. Probably. But we'll be terrible at it together, which makes it better. They kissed then, soft and slow and full of promise. The kind of kiss that felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, Vivian found herself crying again. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that her life had transformed completely from what it had been a year ago. She'd been so certain she knew what success looked like, what power meant, what mattered. And then a janitor with a dead wife's training had shown her an entirely different definition of all those things. The next several weeks unfolded in a cascade of milestones. Theo walked 20 feet, then 30, then 50. By the end of August, he was walking the entire length of the penthouse hallway, his gait still slightly uneven but strong and getting stronger. By early September, they made good on Daniel's promise. Theo walked in the park, on real grass, with other children playing around him. He lasted 15 minutes before his legs tired, but those 15 minutes felt like victory. The Harbor Heights Community Center opened on September 20th with a celebration that drew hundreds from the neighborhood. The converted warehouse gleamed with fresh paint and new equipment, every space designed with accessibility and inclusion in mind. Maria Santos gave a speech that made everyone cry, thanking Vivian and Daniel for turning an impossible dream into reality. Daniel spoke about continuing his wife's legacy, his voice steady despite the emotion clearly overwhelming him. And Vivian, who'd given countless corporate presentations without nervousness, found herself almost paralyzed with anxiety when it came time for her remarks. She stood at the podium looking at the crowd. Families who'd never been able to afford private therapy, kids with disabilities who'd been underserved by the system, volunteers who'd given their time because they believed in the mission. I built a company worth $3 billion, she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. I thought that was success. I thought accumulating wealth and power was what mattered. And then I watched a man with no money and no credentials help my son walk again. And I realized I'd been measuring success by the wrong metrics my entire life. She looked at Daniel, standing in the front row with Lila on his shoulders and Theo beside him. This center isn't charity. It's not a tax write-off or a PR initiative. It's a promise that every child deserves access to care that believes in their potential, regardless of their family's bank account. That's what real success looks like. Everything else is just numbers on a balance sheet. The applause was thunderous. Later, as the celebration continued, Vivian found herself talking to a mother whose son had cerebral palsy, who'd been on a waiting list for therapy for 2 years. We start here next week, the woman said, tears streaming down her face. My boy's going to get the help he needs. I don't have words to thank you. Thank Daniel, Vivian said. This is his vision. I just provided the resources. You provided hope, Ms. Cross. That's worth more than resources. By October, the center was operating at full capacity, serving 80 children a week with a wait list growing daily. Daniel hired 6 more therapists, all people with non-traditional backgrounds but deep practical knowledge, the kind of providers the system usually overlooked. He built a culture of care that prioritized relationships over protocols, outcomes over billing codes, belief over limitation. And through it all, his relationship with Vivian deepened into something that felt increasingly permanent. They navigated the complexity of blending families, scheduling playdates between Theo and Lila, coordinating school pickups and therapy sessions, learning each other's parenting styles and finding compromise. It wasn't always smooth. Vivian struggled to slow down, to be present, to remember that not everything could be scheduled or controlled. Daniel struggled with guilt, with feeling like moving forward meant leaving Sarah behind, with the vulnerability of letting someone matter this much. But they worked through it. They talked, sometimes argued, always ultimately chose each other and their children over pride or fear. One evening in late October, after putting both children to bed in the penthouse, a routine that had become normal, natural, Daniel found Vivian on the terrace looking out at the city lights. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About how different everything is from a year ago. How completely my life has changed." She leaned back against him. "I was alone then. Successful, but alone. And now I have you and Lila, and Theo is walking, and we built something that actually matters. It's almost scary how much better everything is. It doesn't scare me anymore. For a while it did. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. But I think I'm finally accepting that sometimes things just work out. Sometimes people find each other exactly when they're supposed to." Very philosophical for someone who spends his days wrangling children through physical therapy. "Those children teach me philosophy every day. Resilience, hope, the refusal to accept limitation. That's wisdom worth learning." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, and then Vivian turned in his arms to face him. "Move in with us," she said. "You and Lila. Not because it's practical or convenient, but because I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Because Lila and Theo are already siblings in everything but paperwork. Because I'm tired of saying goodbye at the end of the day, when what I want is to build a life with you." Daniel's expression cycled through surprise, uncertainty, and then something that looked like cautious hope. "That's a big step." "I know, and if you're not ready, I understand, but I need you to know I'm ready. For all of it. The mess and the complexity and the beautiful chaos of building a family that doesn't look like anyone's traditional definition, but feels more right than anything I've ever known. Lila would need her own room, space for her art supplies and sensory equipment, a consistent routine that doesn't change because you have a business crisis. Done. We'll convert my office. It's the quietest room, perfect for her needs. And I've been restructuring my responsibilities at work, delegating more, because I finally understand that being present matters more than being indispensable. And Theo, how does he feel about this? He asked me last week when you and Lila were moving in. Apparently he thinks it's already decided." Vivian smiled. "He's been planning how to share his toys and which movies to watch for family movie night." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on her waist, his expression thoughtful. "Sarah and I used to talk about having more kids, building a big, chaotic family, and then she got sick, and that dream died with her." His voice roughened with emotion. "I thought that was it for me. One daughter, one great love, and a lifetime of making peace with what I'd lost. But Vivian, with you, I feel like I get a second chance at the family we wanted, not replacing what I had, but building something new that honors the past while embracing the future." "So that's a yes?" "That's a yes. On one condition." "Name it." "We do this as a real family, not you as the wealthy benefactor providing housing, and I'm the grateful recipient. We're partners, equal voices in how we raise these kids, how we structure our lives, how we build this thing between us. Equal partners, always." Vivian kissed him, sealing the promise. "When do you want to tell the kids?" "They probably already know. Theo apparently has it all planned out, and Lila has a sixth sense for changes before they're announced." They were right. The next morning at breakfast, when Daniel and Vivian gathered both children to explain that Daniel and Lila would be moving into the penthouse, Theo's response was an enthusiastic, "Finally!" And Lila's was a careful nod followed by, Can I paint my new room blue? Blue is calming. Any color you want, Vivian promised. We'll make your space exactly right for you. The move happened gradually over November. Daniel and Lila bringing their belongings bit by bit, transforming the penthouse from Vivian's carefully curated showcase into something warmer, more lived in, infinitely more homey. Lila's drawings covered the refrigerator. Daniel's therapy equipment found space beside Theo's. A second wheelchair for Lila's bad days when sensory overload made walking difficult joined Theo's walker in the hallway. Children's laughter filled rooms that had been silent for too long. Dr. Patel visited in mid-November for Theo's quarterly assessment and found herself watching the family interact over lunch. Theo helping Lila with her sandwich when her hands weren't cooperating, Daniel and Vivian moving around each other in the kitchen with practiced ease, Mrs. Chen beaming at all of them like a proud grandmother. "This is good for him," Dr. Patel told Vivian privately. "Not just the continued therapy, but the emotional stability. He's thriving." "We all are," Vivian said, and meant it. Thanksgiving arrived cold and clear, and for the first time in years, Vivian had family to celebrate with. They cooked together, Daniel handling the turkey with surprising skill, Vivian managing sides with Mrs. Chen's patient guidance, the children setting the table with elaborate care. Maria Santos joined them, bringing her husband and grandchildren, the community center's success a shared achievement to celebrate. Over dinner, they went around the table sharing gratitude. When it came to Theo's turn, he said simply, "I'm thankful I can walk now, and I'm thankful for Daniel teaching me, and I'm thankful Lila is my sister." Lila, who'd been carefully arranging her food into color-coordinated sections, looked up. "Sister," she repeated, testing the word. Then, with that serious expression she wore when making pronouncements she deemed important, "Theo is my brother. That's a fact." The adults exchanged glances over the children's heads, and Vivian felt her heart expand with love for this strange, beautiful family they'd built from broken pieces. December brought the first real snow and Theo's boldest achievement yet. On a crisp Saturday morning, with Daniel supervising and Dr. Patel documenting, Theo walked a full city block, 4,200 feet, 21 minutes, with only 2 short rest breaks. His gait was still marked by the lingering effects of his injury, probably always would be, but he was walking. Really, truly walking. "Can I run next?" he asked afterward, flushed with triumph and exhaustion. "Let's master consistent walking first," Daniel said, but his smile suggested the goal wasn't as impossible as it might once have seemed. "But yeah, buddy, eventually you'll run." That evening, after the children were asleep, Vivian and Daniel sat together in the living room, the space lit by Christmas lights Lila had insisted on hanging in mathematically precise intervals. Daniel had been quiet all day, his expression distant in a way that suggested he was processing something significant. "What's on your mind?" Vivian asked, curling into his side. "I was thinking about Sarah, about the promise I made her." Daniel's arm tightened around Vivian. "I told her I'd keep helping kids, that I wouldn't let her work die with her, and I've kept that promise. The community center, Theo, all the kids we're reaching, she'd be so proud of what we've built." "She would be. You honored her beautifully. But I was also thinking, I made promises to her about our future together, about growing old together, about building a life, and I can't keep those promises. She's gone, and I'm here, and I've fallen in love with someone else." His voice cracked slightly. "And I hope, she'd want that for me. Want me to be happy, to build something new, to not spend the rest of my life mourning what I lost. I'm sure she would want that. Anyone who loved you would want you to find happiness again." I went to her grave yesterday, first time in months, and I told her about you, about us, about Theo and how he's walking now, about the center and Lila's progress, and this life we're building. Daniel pulled back to look at Vivian's face, and I felt like, I don't know, like she gave me permission to move forward, like she was saying it's okay to love again, to build again, to be happy again. Daniel, and I realized I'm ready. Not just ready to move in or be in a relationship, but ready for forever. Ready to build a real family, make real commitments, stop hedging my bets in case it all falls apart. He took her hands, his grip firm and steady. I love you, Vivian. I love your strength and your vulnerability, your fierce protection of Theo and your growing tenderness with Lila. I love how you're learning to be present, how you fight for what matters, how you transformed your entire life when you realized what really mattered. And I want, if you want, I want to marry you, build this family officially, make the commitment real and permanent. Vivian's breath caught. She'd been married once before, briefly and disastrously, to Theo's father. The experience had taught her that marriage without foundation was just paperwork. But this was different. This was built on months of working together, fighting together, learning each other in all the ways that mattered. I want that too, she said, tears spilling over. I want forever with you. I want to be Lila's mother officially, not just the woman who happens to live with her father. I want Theo to have a father who shows up and stays. I want to build something that lasts. Is that a yes? That's absolutely a yes. They kissed, and Vivian felt the last piece of her carefully controlled world dissolve into something far more precious. A future built not on power or profit, but on love and partnership, and the willingness to be vulnerable enough to let people in. They told the children on Christmas morning, presenting the news along with gifts that made their intentions clear. A drawing tablet for Lila with "From Mom" engraved on the back. A professional skateboard for Theo with "From Dad" on the grip tape. The children understood immediately, Theo bursting into tears of joy, and Lila processing quietly before announcing, "Family is people who stay. You're staying." "We're staying," Daniel confirmed. "Forever." They married in March, a small ceremony at the penthouse with only their closest friends and family. Maria Santos served as Vivian's maid of honor. Dr. Patel stood up for Daniel. Theo and Lila were ring bearers, both dressed in formal wear that made them look impossibly grown up. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. The vows they wrote themselves focused not on love as an abstract concept, but on specific promises. To show up, to communicate honestly, to parent together, to build the community center's legacy together, to choose each other every day even when it was hard. "I promise to believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the emotion clearly overwhelming him. "The way you believed in me when I was just a janitor with a dream. The way I believed in Theo when everyone else saw only limitation." "I promise to be present," Vivian responded, her own voice thick with tears. "To remember that success isn't measured in profit margins but in moments that matter. To be the mother Theo deserves and the partner you need, even when it scares me." They sealed their promises with a kiss, while their children cheered and their friends applauded, and Vivian felt the final pieces of her old life. The loneliness, the drivenness, the belief that achievement equaled fulfillment fall away completely. The reception afterward was held at the community center, the space that represented everything they'd built together. Children from the program performed adaptive dance routines. Families shared stories of transformation, kids who'd learned to walk, to communicate, to believe in their own potential. And through it all, Vivian and Daniel moved together, partners in every sense, building something far more valuable than any corporate empire. Spring bloomed into summer, and with it came new milestones. Theo started first grade at a school that accommodated his needs without limiting his potential. He walked to class every morning, slowly, carefully, but independently. Lila transitioned to a specialized program that understood her needs and celebrated her gifts. The community center expanded, adding evening programs and weekend workshops, reaching more families every month. And Vivian, who'd once measured her days in board meetings and acquisition targets, found herself measuring time differently now. In Theo's laughter as he raced Lila across the living room, there are different gates, not limitations, but just different ways of moving through the world. In quiet evenings with Daniel, talking about their days, planning their futures, being present with each other in ways that terrified and thrilled her. In the families at the community center who thanked her not for her money, but for believing their children deserved better. One evening in August, almost exactly a year after Theo had first walked unassisted, the family gathered in the living room for movie night. Theo was sprawled on the floor, his legs stretched out in a way that still seemed miraculous. Lila sat beside him, showing him her latest drawing, a portrait of their family, each figure rendered in meticulous detail. Daniel and Vivian occupied the couch, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "Hey, Mom," Theo said during a quiet moment in the movie. "Do you remember when I asked if you thought I'd ever run?" "I remember." "Daniel said eventually I would, if I kept working hard. And I've been thinking, I want to try, for real. Not just walking fast, but actually running." Vivian looked at Daniel, saw the careful consideration on his face as he evaluated Theo's readiness. "What do you think?" she asked him. "I think—" Daniel paused, that familiar thoughtfulness that meant he was balancing hope against caution. "I think we can start training for it. It'll be hard work, lots of strength building, balance exercises, cardiovascular endurance. And even with all that, running might look different for you than for other kids. But if you're willing to put in the work, I'm willing to help you try." "I'm willing. I'll work really hard, I promise." "Then we'll start next week. Build a new progression plan. See what's possible." Daniel smiled. "You've surprised me before, buddy. Who knows what you're capable of?" Lila looked up from her drawing. "Theo will run. That's what he does. He does impossible things." "We all do impossible things in this family," Vivian said softly. "That's kind of our specialty." She was right. They'd done the impossible. Built a family from broken pieces, created a community center that was changing lives, learned to love and trust and be vulnerable in ways none of them had imagined possible. A billionaire CEO who'd learned that power meant nothing without purpose. A widowed janitor who'd kept his promise to his dying wife and found love again. A boy who'd been told he'd never walk independently who now dreamed of running. A girl whose different way of seeing the world was celebrated as the gift it was. They were a family built not by blood or convention, but by choice, by belief, by the willingness to show up for each other even when it was hard. As the movie played on and the children settled into comfortable silence, Vivian found herself thinking about the night that had started everything, standing outside Theo's door, hearing laughter, seeing Daniel help her son in ways she'd never imagined possible. She'd been so certain that night that she understood how the world worked, that money and power could solve any problem, that control was safety. She'd been so wrong, and she'd never been more grateful to be wrong about anything in her life. "I love you," she whispered to Daniel, quiet enough that only he could hear. "I love you too," he whispered back. "Thank you for seeing me. For taking a chance on a janitor with nothing to offer but belief and stubborn hope. You had everything to offer. I just had to learn what everything really meant." They sat together as the movie ended and the children drifted towards sleep. Theo's head pillowed on Lila's stuffed rabbit, Lila's hand resting on her brother's shoulder. A family that shouldn't have worked on paper but was perfect in practice. A family that proved sometimes the best things in life came not from careful planning, but from the courage to trust, to be vulnerable, to believe in impossible things. Outside, the city lights glittered against the darkening sky, the empire Vivian had built still standing but no longer defining her worth. Inside, in this penthouse that had once been a showcase of success, but was now a home, 4 people who'd found each other against all odds slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were exactly where they belonged. And somewhere in the night, perhaps, Sarah Mercer's spirit smiled. Her work continued, her husband happy, her promise kept in ways that transcended her own lifetime. Love multiplying instead of dividing, spreading outward in ripples that touched countless lives. The janitor who'd been invisible became the father who was indispensable. The CEO who'd had everything discovered what actually mattered. The boy who couldn't walk learned to believe in his own strength. The girl who saw the world differently taught others to see beauty in patterns they'd overlooked. And together, they built something far more valuable than any empire. A family bound not by obligation but by choice. Not by circumstance but by love. Not by what they'd been, but by who they'd chosen to become. That was the real miracle. Not Theo walking, though that was miraculous enough. Not the community center, though it would change thousands of lives. The miracle was this: that broken people could heal each other, that different didn't mean lesser, that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought or controlled, but only built through patience, belief, and the courage to love without reservation. In the morning, they would wake and begin again. Therapy sessions and work meetings, school drop-offs and family dinners, the beautiful chaos of building a life together. There would be setbacks and challenges, moments of doubt and fear, because that was the nature of being human. But they would face it all together. And that made all the difference. The end.